All right, all right, all right. How y'all doing? Sorry that I started so late. Um, actually, I went and took a nap, and I was only gonna close my eyes for a couple minutes, and bam. So here I am. Welcome. Let me see. I'm gonna start off by saying thank you for being here. If this is your first time, I hope that you find something here on this channel that can you kind of keep you coming back. If you've been here before, thank you for visiting my channel. Everything that is said here is my opinion. It is research and it's done with analytical thinking. Also, I talk in generalized terms, so therefore, I do not speak on anybody or anything unless I know the true facts about it. But now that I've said that, um, tonight's show is going to be called "Is the GPS and the elantra going to get them?" So, yes, sleep is a wonderful thing after a long week. So, you know, had a lot of mind using things, and I've had more long lives this week than I usually do. So it kind of drained me. I guess I wasn't really noticeably tired until like these last couple days. So let me say hello and give people a shout out before I begin. Rondi looked like she was here. Heather, how you doing? Swamp Rose, thank you for being here. Um, so let's see. Aquarius, how you doing? So let me pull up some of this stuff. Let's see. I got a lot of things that I've done research over today that I got to figure out what I did with my notes. All right, here we go. Let's start off with this. This is what I want to start off with. I'm kind of running slow tonight. I don't know, so hopefully I'll be able to get everything together so that it doesn't look um, sloppy. But I'm still trying to wake up here. The reason that I chose this is because I was looking at this definition, and it says the 2015 Hyundai Elantra did indeed come with GPS, but only as part of the upgraded infotainment package. This package added a 7-inch touchscreen to the center dash, which include Bluetooth functionality as well as the navigation and GPS capabilities. Some say the cars manufactured after 2010, like the 2015 Elantra, use GPS connectivity to track the vehicle. So it also goes on to say underneath the seats or inside the upholstery, underneath the floor mats, underneath the carpet, in the trunk or hatchback, plugged into the data collector, which is usually located on the underside of the steering wheel, behind the radiator, next to or between the batteries, in the air ducts, in the air filter. So that got me thinking. It got me thinking, okay, did his have any of these things going on? And I was thinking, wow, how could you figure that out? So I looked at this picture right here, and we've all seen this picture. So let me pull this picture up. There's the famous picture of him getting pulled over in Indiana. Okay, bear with me here. There we go. Okay, so we've all seen that picture. And you look at the dash area, his does not have a 7-inch screen. His is the basic, has the radio, has a, kind of a little indentation here. I guess this would tell you where the time is. And it looks very basic, but it doesn't have the touchscreen. It doesn't have the 7-inch touchscreen. Because if it did, we'd be able to see it. And I've seen other photos, and you can look them up yourself if you'd like, where people have that big 7-inch touchscreen that they can um, type in navigation and things of that nature as well. And Heather said the VIN also will tell you what it's equipped with from the factory. Yeah, I saw that as well. I just didn't want to pay for that feature first. I didn't know if it actually get into that department or not. So I didn't really follow that one anymore. But that's a great comment, Heather. You're right. Um, and I did pull up the VIN and I was looking around, but I wanted to talk about that a little bit and think, man, that is really because that is really interesting because you know I've heard that before with a lot of individuals where they've said, well, is there a tracker in there? Will he be able to be tracked even though his phone was off? Tell me what you think. Chat, what do y'all think? Do you think that his 2015, or have you heard otherwise that his 2015 had indeed a tracker or a GPS navigation system? I only mention it because I've written for AutoClans for a few years. It's not something I currently do. Okay, so Swampo said no, she doesn't think so. Do y'all agree with um his his vehicle not having a tracking? Because I really don't think so either. But you just never know. And if it did, it might be detrimental. It might be detrimental to him if they can somehow put that on him. And I was also thinking to myself, well, um, that vehicle is more important than people realize. And I also, since I was talking about the Elantra the other day, um, I was able to pull this up as well. Um, this is basically an overlay that somebody did. Rondi says, I don't think the car had that. Heather says, I think his dad's phone shows they're using that for GPS at the very moment when they stop. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Um, yeah, because his dad has a cell phone on his lap. So yeah. But have you ever heard of a car? What's that called whenever like a vehicle is stolen and you can like track your car, low jack or something like that? Like when a vehicle is stolen, and some vehicles come with, I'm very certain it's called LoJack or something like that. And you can track your vehicle by that. So you're able um, to track your vehicle that way. Okay. So look at the screen right here. We were talking about this the other night with the Elantra. Up here in the left-hand side, if you're looking at the screen at the still shot that they took at the Exxon gas station. So I found this, and then it kind of lightened it up, and then they overlay what they lightened up over an Elantra. And as you can see, it's pretty spot on. I mean, it's not very far off. What do y'all think about that? Y'all think that could be, because we had a huge debate about that the other day about, well, whether that's an Elantra, whether it's not. What do y'all think about that one? I heard different things. It does no have not have GPS feature, but there's supposed to be a black box. Some say it tracks locations, some say it doesn't, and others say it does, but temperature storage. Okay, Paula. Yeah, I mean, I've always heard that though, as far as let me before we go on with that, I guess we'll still stay on this. Look at this vehicle right here and let me know what you think as far as the overlay. We're still talking about the ability to track this Elantra. Do you believe that if it didn't have the GPS, did it have a low jack? And I'll pull up the definition for a low jack so you guys can understand what that is. Low jack is the OnStar and others card that you can control remote. Definitely have the GPS. Okay. So let me pull that picture back up so we can see if we can see anything clearly in there to determine one way or the other. Okay, let's look in this vehicle. I've been in a lot of vehicles that have OnStar, and they usually have it right here in the rear view mirror. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's usually where I've seen it, or this little area right here. You know, where you have that flap that you pull down the little plastic thing, and there's, you know, you can put your sunglasses or your glasses in there. And sometimes I've even seen it in the dash area, but not very seldom. It's usually right here in the rear view mirror. I think they would have a warrant for this info from the manufacturer company providing the service. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just brainstorming here a little bit. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this as far as, because I've always heard about this. You know, I've heard about, well, are they going to be able to track the vehicle? Did they find any kind of GPS thing? You know, stuff like that. So does that mean no low jack since he didn't have GPS? I'm looking at this photo. I mean, because that's all we really got. When I typed in the VIN number the other day, it didn't really, I mean, it gave me a definition where it wouldn't be able to tell me very much as far as that. And if anybody has that information, you can email it to me. Um, but the information that I got, I didn't see anything that indicated this car came with OnStar or anything. I mean, it very well could have. And like I'm saying, right here in this area is where it would have happened. I mean, this is where the button usually is on the rear view mirror. Those of you in chat, do you have any vehicle with an OnStar or low jack on your vehicle? And if you do, can you share in the chat where your button is located at? Because mine doesn't have OnStar. Mine is mine. I drive a truck and it doesn't have OnStar, so therefore I'm kind of clueless on that. But any of you in chat, if you have a vehicle, do you have an OnStar on the? And if you do, where's the button located on your OnStar? So here's the definition of the low jack. It said, what is the LoJack system? LoJack is a GPS-based vehicle location tracking device located through vehicle identification number and other descriptive information, and then registered with the National Crime Information Center database. And then it says, do all new cars come with LoJack? Says contact a dealer or car manufacturer directly. Many cars come with LoJack from the factory. And the quickest way to check if it did is to watch out for the manufacturer or dealer you bought the car from. Or reach out. Check with your local garage or mechanic should be able to tell you. Let me type in here. Hey, I typed in there, it says, let's see what the first one says. Yeah, it's going to be quite difficult to see if his vehicle had LoJack or if it had any kind of tracking mechanisms. And Rondi says, I don't. My vehicles are old. Wasn't Brian's car a former rental car? You know, Rondi, I've never heard that before. Has anybody in the chat heard that before, that his vehicle was a former rental car? If you have, share your thoughts with us. And kind of moving away from that a little bit, I found this picture right here, and this is Jack D. I believe this is Adam. And Kaylee was in the back seat taking the picture. So you can see that this is not an Elantra. This is not one. I think he has some kind of luxury vehicle. But as you can see, his has a touchscreen. This is what it would look like if Brian had the GPS format in his vehicle. He would have this touchscreen right here, the ability to type all that in. And do you see how these three buttons right here, there's usually the ability to one of these buttons to be an OnStar. So this car, I would say, definitely has a tracking device. And I thought this photo was interesting, not only because Jack D's in it and Adam's in it, it's because Kaylee took it. And there was another photo after this one that this showed road trip. So they obviously hung out together, they obviously knew each other. And I thought that photo was quite interesting. Um, Rondi says that info was early on. No, I've not heard that. I'm sure. Seems like I heard he was a third or fourth owner, but can't verify. Yeah, all his information are or is not are is on the car registration thing that you can pay for and get get a sense of a little more information about his vehicle. Swamp Rose, I don't know if you're still here, but you were asking me for some photos the other day, and I came upon this one as well. And I'm going to show you this photo. This photo right here is also another photo. This shows those apartments along the side of the street that had the ring cameras that we were talking about. So this side of the road, this obviously was taken um, once it started snowing or some part of the winter time frame in that area. So this would kind of demonstrate a little how those apartments faced the 1122 King Road house. And I had found this one, and I meant to send this to you. I guess I did not, but wanted to show you this side of the street and see how the doors are not very far off from the ground level. And as you can remember from the 1122, it's almost like what we were talking about the other day, that it was a fishbowl. So it kind of went down into a valley. So this would be up and over that area, and you could see more because it's higher up. So I wanted to show you that photo if you're still here. I don't know if you're still here. No, I've not heard that. I'm sure we talked about that one. Seems like a okay. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I have these photos and I wanted to show you guys how I incorporated a lot of this information together. Um, so what do y'all think as far as what I just presented there? Do you believe that um, his video or his car is capable to be tracked? Do you think his vehicle is going to be the downfall in the end? Do you think that they found something in the car that could possibly, exonerate him or place him at the scene? I want to place something getting away from the elantra here, and this is going to make a lot more sense because I did the elantra thing yesterday and I kind of forgot what direction I wanted to go with it. But I want you to pay attention to these videos that I'm about to play you, and then I'm going to talk about um, some of the things that were stated very early on. Okay, and I even found some pictures that were quite interesting to me. Um, So here we go. I want you to pay attention to this video. It talks about early on, it talks about how the wound didn't match.
Here on the University of Idaho's campus, I came across a young man who was good friends with Ethan Chapin. And he told me what it's been like to face this tragic loss. Watch.
I knew Ethan and Xana.
What do you remember about them?
They were really good people. I always loved seeing them whenever they were around campus. Ethan was a good friend of mine, so it's pretty sad. But I came back because I still want to keep pursuing my dreams. But you know, it's definitely a lot hard for people to come back, especially after that.
Yeah. Do you think it's brought the community, this university, closer together, or has it fractured the campus?
I mean, I would definitely say it fractured it, as you know, not a lot of people are here.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's brought us together, especially just the Moscow community and Idaho in general.
How do you feel about them not catching the person that did this? Is that completely shocking to you right now? Or
I mean, given the little amount of evidence that they have and have found, it's not too surprising that they haven't found the suspect, but it's still just disheartening.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe.
Okay, that was just a definition on how early on how this whole thing kind of fractured the community and what was going on during that time frame to demonstrate a little bit about the demeanor behind the people that were still not certain who the killer was, not certain what was going on, and things of that nature. And I was also talking about, I was talking with somebody today about when early on it talked about the Idaho murders were targeted and not that of the serial killer, kind of like what this, this title infers. I don't know if y'all remember Mark Furman, the detective that was on the OJ case, and how he interjected himself into this case. Well, he was able to give a lot of opinions, a lot of interviews, and a lot of information that kind of made sense in a way, because he was talking about how these murders and the term that they used as far as targeted really applied to certain things. And I'm going to show you how this all goes. Let me show you the video here. I feel like I'm all over the place. I probably am. If I am, I apologize, guys.
Mark Furman joins me now. He's a former LAPD detective and currently lives in Idaho. So, Detective, if you were running this on point, what would you be doing right now?
Well, Jesse, I would probably be doing exactly what they're doing right now. I'm actually fairly impressed when I go back and actually see exactly how fast they put together a task force. And many times, smaller agencies are hesitant to be second guessed, so they don't bring in other agencies or the feds or the state police because they don't want to be, criticized or anything else. And that's not the fact here. So I'd like everybody to understand that almost every serial killer investigation that we know that's famous starts out in large agencies that don't get any handle on it until victim 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So
do you think this is a serial killer on the loose, Detective?
I would say no. Just as the chief of police said in the press conference, and you stated in your monologue, we have a targeted crime here, and they're not going to lay out exactly why it's targeted. I think the chief of police was quite candid, dancing around the question a little bit. He gave an answer that they are looking at it as a targeted offense because of the totality of the circumstance. Well, of course, that would cover anything and everything. So they are looking at this as a targeted offense. And a targeted offense means that the suspect knows and sought out one or more victims in that house specifically.
So do you
for a
believe that
reason
this
that possibly
dog that
only
was
he knows.
filleted like a fish is connected to this quadruple homicide?
I think that we could pass over that and put that in the file to get to sometime. But they need to stay on point, and I think they've stayed on point fairly well on this. Now they've turned to the public. Blood spatter analysis, you brought it up. The FBI's experts are there. Now, blood spatter analysis can tell us a lot of things. It can tell us the progression of the wounds, which victim was first, second, third, and fourth. It can tell us if the suspect is right or left-handed, and if the attack occurred when both people are standing, sometimes the height. We've got shoe prints that are no doubt either there, whether they were obliterated by the suspect during the battle, the fight, the murder, or it was people that came in after the fact.
All right, so let me ask you
There
this as
should be
a
shoe
former
prints there,
detective.
so-
You could possibly find the height, and you could possibly determine right or left-handed, and you may get a footprint. So maybe you got a type of shoe, size of shoe. Does that narrow this thing down enough to give you a clue about who you're chasing?
Well, the first thing is they're not going to tell us what they come up with in any of that. Like the average shoe size for a man is 10 and a half. So you can separate things into categories, and if they're lucky enough, they'll be able to find some forensic evidence, even if they can reduce that just to blood typing, even though the DNA is not in the system. So they are collecting information that might point them towards a suspect or be actually useful when they actually have a suspect or a person of interest for an interrogation. And these are all small items. And another one that I'm really hopeful for is if the suspect cut himself in these attacks, because a couple of the victims supposedly had some defensive wounds, and in knife attacks that would most often be a cut to the hands or the forearms because they're putting their hands up to stop the blow of the knife. Yeah. If the suspect cut himself controlling the victim with his weak hand, there's a chance he might have struck himself. So they're working on all these things that, in most cities you'll never hear about in the news. And in big cities, this happens.
I mean,
all
but
the
this
time.
is a small town, and we get it. But I mean, the whole country's following this because it's 4 victims. It's a knife attack. It's in a small town. Everyone is scared at that school. Everyone's terrified at the Pacific Northwest that there's a serial killer with a knife on the loose. So I hope they wrap this up quick because there's a lot of woods area, and this guy could be anywhere, or guys. And well, I think they're doing a good job so far, but they got to catch a break. Detective, I got to run. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys. So that was a very good interview, in my opinion. He was able to tell exactly the difference between a targeted attack and a serial killer being in the area. So think about that a little bit. We heard that very early on. Targeted. This residence was targeted. So I didn't take that to mean anything other than, well, obviously it was targeted. That's what happened there. There was 4 people murdered, and obviously it was targeted. But think about that a little deeper. Early on, and I'm about to read a rumor that was floating around during that time, and this rumor seems so realistic, like this was the evidence that proved exactly what happened at the house. It was that convincing to me. So think about that word targeted. What would make law enforcement believe that A, right off the bat, that the situation was targeted, and B, who would the target towards? Because I remember early on everybody wanted it to be, that Kaylee was the one that was targeted. She was targeted because her wounds were obviously a little worse than the others. But looking back and doing some reading today, and you know what? I was so out of it today, I didn't even um, download the photos that I had to give to this presentation tonight. That's how out of it was. So I'll have to get those photos this weekend and possibly put them on um, the Monday stream. And by the way, Carla was going to come tonight, but she has family stuff going on this weekend, graduation and things. So we're going to do the narcissism, psychopath, sociopath series on Monday evening. So I will probably just present some more photos that I had for this stream. I tell you, it's been a hectic kind of week this week for some reason. But as what I was saying about the targeted attack, and I know that whenever you think of that word, you think, okay, there's a target, we're going to go after it, we're going to try to secure our objective. So early on, the target, as most people were believing, was Ethan. I'm not saying this. I'm just going based on what was the early on rumors, the early on comments, and things of that nature. And even Steve Gonsalves said in one of his interviews that the killer didn't have to go upstairs, meaning that if he would have stayed on the second floor, he would have, gotten the target out of the way and just possibly his daughter and her best friend would have been spared. So thinking about that, and also some of the descriptiveness that was put out about Ethan's wounds and injuries and things of that nature, it made a lot of sense, because I don't know if you remember, thank you, Swamp Rose, and welcome back. I don't know if you remember that very early on they were talking about Ethan's injuries and how his legs were cut so deeply that it went all the way through the hamstring. And there was some dismemberment as well that happened that was so brutal. Whenever this was going around, it really seemed like, okay, well, whoever did this obviously wanted to paint a picture to whoever found him about, this was because of something you did. And I don't know if you've ever been prevalent to any old mafia movies or even cartel, if you've even heard about cartel um, tortures and things of that nature. They make a point whenever they kill you. They make a point to position your bodies in a way, and this is with other serial killers as well, or killers as well, that they position your bodies in a position to show embarrassment, um, and possibly the reasoning behind the killing. The Gainesville Ripper. I don't know if you are familiar with him. Um, he would position the females and pose them after sexually assaulting them and killing them, and he would pose them after the fact, and he would humiliate them even after death. So I got to thinking about this targeted word. And let me share with you some of this rumor that I copied and pasted off that I saw. Because this makes a lot of sense. And I remember reading this because the internet was going crazy at this time. So I remember reading this. Put myself at the bottom. I hope that's large enough for you to see that. It said the process repeats until the final amount of spaces are filled and those finalists become full brothers. Everyone else has been deemed not good enough and they're destined to F right off, which you can imagine probably stings pretty good to those pledges. What he's talking about, he's talking about a pledge that was in Sigma Chi. He went through the hazing process, he went through everything. And the fact that he was acting creepy or very off towards Kaylee and Maddie, and it was reported to Ethan, and they didn't let him in because of that. And this individual did this whenever he was asked to take Kaylee and Maddie to drive them around, and they reported that back to Ethan, and Ethan reported it back to Sigma Chi. They dealt with it, didn't let him in, and then that's how this rumor kind of gets started. So hang on, here we go. It says, so the rumor goes like this. Maddie and Kaylee were big dogs in their sororities and had big reputations. One of the pledges for the fraternity, Sigma Chi, which Ethan was a member of, had gone through a lot of hazing for a long time, and then right when the time was at hand to be accepted, he was instead rejected. The reason for this pledge rejection was said to be, and unfortunately told directly to him, that he had acted weird and or creepy toward Maddie and Kaylee, and she told Ethan. I've heard it's a specific guy who's known, seen a name, and received a DM telling me the initials, which says to me it's a very solid rumor that many local people know and are talking about, and he was dropped suddenly after a long period of hazing by the frat. Supposedly, something happened one night where this guy was called to be a DD designated driver and made to take Maddie and Kaylee somewhere by automobile. After this trip, they report he was weird and or creepy towards them and informed his superior, Ethan, who was also part of Sigma Chi. Ethan informed the other full members of the frat, and because Kaylee and Maddie had clout and were not only well-known friends of Sigma Chi, but also well-respected otherwise. The report was taken very seriously by Sigma Chi, and the prospect was dropped like a hot potato. So now this angry guy who spent a long time being basically Sigma Chi's bitch, one of the many such bitches, had just been humiliated on a grand scale that would see him completely rejected from the Greek life altogether. His long time of being a B for the possibility of joining the frat, pointless, useless, gone forever. And he blames three specific people, Kaylee, Maddie, and Ethan. Later on, he showed up to the Sigma Chi party, uninvited. On that fateful night, the murders took place and started shit with Ethan, who was told Maddie and Kaylee reported him to, and who reported him to higher-ups in the organization. A scuffle ensued, and Ethan and his girlfriend Xana decided to bounce from the party to avoid being there later on, just in case, from their perspective, this creepy fucker returns to start more shit. But this guy's been in and with the frat for a long time and is well aware that all three of the people he is mad at live in the same house on King Street. Late in the evening, he attacks and kills all three of his prospective victims, along with Xana, who is the one who had the defensive wound because he stabbed Ethan before her, because he is male and has more upper body strength to defend himself. Obvious first target. And then she woke up hearing the struggle and tried desperately to save her beloved boyfriend to no avail. If I have any part of this narrative wrong, someone please correct me and I will amend it. But I just want to say that I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm simply saying that this is what I've heard regarding this particular rumor. And it could be absolutely made up. I'm not vouching for it. I've never even been very close to Idaho or college, so that's very little a person can say. So tell me what y'all think. Have y'all heard that before as well? Have y'all ever heard that rumor? Did you hear that rumor very early on? Is this thing on? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Well, think about that a little bit. If this individual was passing this along, and I heard this rumor a lot early on in the investigation, not from the LE, but from other pages that I was going to, and this did not come from 4chan. It came from another social platform. So that was going around a lot. And if you look at that situation, and I've talked about this as well in some of my other streams, Occam's razor. Let's use that in accordance to this rumor, to this situation. Okay? Occam's razor. The scenario that makes the most sense and puts people in the closest proximity to have committed the crime. So, if this individual that they're speaking of, did he have, if based on what that rumor says, and we're just breaking down a rumor just for the sake of, okay? Not trying to say this is true, this was true, any of that. I'm just running you through the process of breaking down a tip versus believing in it and going through the speculatory situation with it. Okay, so was there motive there? And if you know what motive is, I mean that basically, was there a reason for an individual to be placed in that vicinity to potentially carry out a crime for a particular reason? Well, they've established that. They've established that with the fact that there was anger and humiliation based on the fact that he went all through the hazing and then got kicked out. Was there opportunity there? Yes, there was opportunity. There was opportunity because the individual was in close proximity of 3 of the 4 people that were murdered. Was there any kind of reasoning that would put this individual in the home? Could he have had access to the home? Could he have been around these 3 or 4 individuals that were murdered? Could he have been around them? What do you think? Yes. Yes, he had ample opportunity. So based on those 4 things alone, if he wasn't investigated further, or he was investigated and then found not to be valid, then as you say, they let it go. They would have let it go. They wouldn't have pursued it further. But do you see how that little scenario right there kind of goes to the ability to break down whether this is a credible person to possibly pursue further, or is this just somebody's throwing in the mix? And Rondi says a lot of people had access. You're right. A lot of people did have access to those 4 people. Does U of I Timmy Reed case have any connection? Good question, Heather. Great question. Can you kind of recollect my memory on that? Because I'm not too versed on that case. The Mavs coming to the scene armed with weapons, reach and fight with frat. Yes. That would meet motive as well. I mean, that's another thing. Was there any time frame that this individual discussed possibly hurting, harming, or even getting even with any of the three? So you have to take into account these questions that I'm throwing out there, because even though there was people interviewed, some of them didn't meet this criteria. Yes, it does sound very similar. So if they don't meet the criteria, kind of like in the OJ case, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. But I mean, they're not even at trial, so we're not even talking about the trial. But I'm talking about interviewing the witnesses. And do y'all remember that? I think this might be the case that you're talking about, Heather. No, that's not what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of, there was two individuals arrested either right after the murders or right before the murders. I can't really recollect that, but there were two individuals arrested, and they were arrested for some kind of criminal mischief or something like that, and then the murders happened, and then all of a sudden they were on the hunt. Those two being arrested for whatever it was they were arrested for. Obviously, it was important enough to make national news, and then it kind of got swept away. And I do remember that you're talking about, Heather, right now, about the football team that came to that kid's house and beat him up with pipes and masks and weapons. Yeah, I do remember that. So you have to ask yourself, Occam's razor, in the very beginning of this case, they were stuck on the motive. What is the motive? What is the motive? What was the motive? And you have to ask yourself, if you're a prosecutor, which none of us are, but you have to ask yourself, what would the motive be in this case? Some random guy from across the country moved to Pullman, becomes a teacher's assistant, interviews for a position at the Pullman Police Department. We don't hear whether he was accepted, denied, or just interviewed, or maybe it was just his first interview. Because a lot of times, whenever you interview for a high-level position like that, there's usually more than one interview. It's not like they interview you once and then they hire you. It usually doesn't happen that way. Usually, you get interviewed by a lot of different people. So, he didn't have any connection to these girls that we know of, unless it was based on second or third party connection. That's a good one to look up. Rondi Gainesville Ripper. That's a great case to really look up, because there's a lot of similarities in that one and this one. And to answer your question, I believe that a lot of serial killers, whenever it comes to motive, Their motive is simply the opportunity to make their fantasy reality. This is the opportunity for me to finally make my reality that I've been planning for so long, to give it life, to give it the ability for me to actually participate in it and make my fantasy a reality. The opportunity is here. Let me take it. I've seen a lot of people giving the elantra going around the house more than once as like a shark circling to prey. Circling to prey. So think about that. The fantasy is finally going to happen. It's finally going to happen tonight. Heather says it seems quite bold to show up at someone's house armed with a PVC pipe and wearing a mask, angry about an argument with another student. When King Road, someone showed up with a weapon masked after a fight. Yeah. But you know, a lot of times, you know, individuals in that mindset, whether you're drunk, whether you're under the influence of chemicals or anything like that, because statistics have stated that it's not normal for people to commit crimes such as fighting and all that, because they're naturally we're not programmed to fight. It's not normal for people to fight. Whether you believe that or whether you don't, look it up. But it's not normal for people to fight. So once you become intoxicated or under the influence of chemicals, it's a lot easier for your inhibition to go down, and you normally do things that you would not do if you weren't under the influence. And I'm not blaming the chemicals, but they give you the green light to do it without conscience. And that's another thing that a killer has going for them, as we talked about the other night. As a psychopath, they have no conscience whatsoever. None. And it's interesting to me to think that as we're talking about Mr. Koberger coming into this scene, supposedly doing what he did, and then leaving, and then going on his daily life like nothing ever happened. You know, the next day, gets a haircut, goes to his doctor's appointment, goes to work, like nothing ever happened. So you just killed, if he's the one, you just killed 4 people. And you're going to go be able to get a haircut, go to the doctor, teach a class. Does that match up to psychotic behavior that we're talking about, or does it not? Does that show conscience? Those students are aware the person inside the King Road home was wearing a mask and came on. Why do something so similar? It seems like one could say they did it because they already got away with the murder. Very possible. You just never know. But as we're doing, we're kind of linking and using our brain to think outside the box, and I like that. I like the fact that you're able to think outside the box and not be so one-dimensional that nothing else could have possibly happened. So all the individuals that are saying that Brian is innocent, could the theory or could the hypothesis that we're pointing out today, could that point to a different person committing these crimes? And to the people that say, well, he's guilty, they don't have that open-minded mentality that they would possibly see that there could be anybody else or any other scenario that could possibly take place so these, so that it adds up. There's a lot of individuals in this puzzle piece. That's why it makes it so difficult to really understand and to just say, okay, well, this is what happened. These are the evidence, and this is what happens. But there's so many people involved. So many people involved. Yes, exactly. I go with that as well, Heather. Let me play a little bit of this video that I have in my library. Where I was talking about some of this already, but I have it all put together, so it's in a lot more formable way rather than tonight where I feel like I'm all over the place. So if you'll bear with having two of me talking, here we go. This is talking about the questionnaire. Inside looking, the one where he was asking the questions as far as if you were going to commit this murder, what would you do? What would you do afterwards? How would you feel? What was the emotional attachment? So try to open your mind right here and let's go down this avenue for a little bit. Okay. The first one that I start to talk about is a post by Inside Looking, which it has been rumored that was Brian Koberger. It says speculation: killer parked behind the house, approached the property through the tree line, entered the sliding door and left it open, committed the murders, and exited the sliding door. One knife, according to the coroner's statement. Time of murder, approximately 3:20 to 3:40 a.m. According to a car fleeing the scene on camera on Highway 8, approximately 3:45. Vehicle left skid marks upon the exit. Please see photos below for more information. And the guy underneath him says, dude is solving his own crime. Psycho. So the only thing that's wrong is the time frame according, but maybe this time frame is more accurate. Maybe it's a little more accurate than we believe. So let's see what old 12 gauge had to say about this. 20 a.m. to 3:40 a.m. According to the car fleeing the scene and on camera on Highway 8, approximately at 3:45. Vehicle left skid marks upon exit. Please see photos below for more information. And somebody commented, dude is solving his own crime. Psycho. So let's talk about this a little bit. It's a very detailed, very descriptive outline of the murder. And it's also been said or speculated that Brian was using this screen name to communicate with people on the internet. I know another name, the Papa Roger one, was discounted as not being true. But this one I never heard was discounted as not being true. So whenever they confiscated his computer, all the information from his social media accounts, I'm sure they'll be able to tell if he actually was communicating with people with this screen name. How ironic would it be that Brian would be communicating online, presenting facts that nobody knew at that time? How would anybody know these things? Even though he starts out, or she, whoever wrote this, even though they start out speculation, killer parked behind the house, approached the property through the tree lines. Well, we've discussed that. It was documented that he entered the sliding door, and the bushy eyebrow dude exited through the sliding door. The knife, I don't remember hearing that from the coroner about when he was at DeSales University. Did he post? Okay, now I fast forwarded a little bit to get to the questionnaires because you said we're going to discuss this. We have to discuss the validity of the Garrett discovery. Okay. So here's some of the questions that were asked in the Reddit post that he posted. And some of the questions that he posted up there was, what was the first move you made in order to accomplish your goal? Please detail any thoughts and feelings at this point. Before leaving, is there anything else that you did? Before making your move, how did you approach the victim or target? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling. Why did you choose the victim or target over others? Did you prepare for the crime before leaving your home? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this point. After committing the crime, what were you thinking and feeling? After arriving, what step did you take prior to locating the victim or your target, i.e., person or object? Please detail your thoughts and feelings. Why did you choose that victim to target over the others? So, with these questions, I want to ask you guys in the chat. Well, I don't see it all either, but I want to discuss based on what we know now. Could he have gotten information from somebody based on this questionnaire? We'll never know unless it's in the trial. Did he answer any of these questions based on him being in jail right now? Do you believe that some of these questions were answered based on the PCA? Before leaving, is there anything else that you did, like before you left his house? Or is this before you leaving the crime scene? Is there anything else you did? Before making your move, how did you approach the victim or the target? Did you circle the area 3 times? Park. Did he answer his own questions? Was he being a case study for himself? I mean, this is just another avenue that I'm going down. I'm not saying he did it. I'm not saying he didn't do it. I just want you to think a little bit and how this all pertains to the case, because the other day we were talking about evidence, right? This has to be some sort of evidentiary collection that the police surely have in their case somewhere. Did you prepare for the crime before leaving your home? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this point. So, if he prepared, or whoever prepared for the crime before leaving their home, what would they be doing? They'd be going over, quote unquote, the kill kit, making sure they have everything in it, making sure they didn't forget anything, making sure that they have the situation in their head played out, that it's all muscle memory, that it's not them thinking about it, just doing it. What were you feeling or thinking at this point? I'm pretty sure that if I was ever to go commit a quadruple murder, the thoughts would not be there. There would be no thoughts in my head. It would strictly be emotional response. there'd be no feeling. It would be at this point kind of like it's showtime. It's time to go do what you need to do, or what fantasy that you fantasized for so long, because this is the last chance you got to do it. After committing the crime, what were you thinking and feeling? Based on the fact that he rounded that corner and almost crashed his car, I'm sure he was very delusional, very exhausted. After arriving, what steps did you take prior to locating the victim or the target? Please detail your thoughts and feelings. See, this questionnaire is based on feelings and emotions. So if he's asking about feelings and emotions, that would transcribe to having a conscience. Would it not? If your feelings and emotions are attached to something, it would translate to having a conscience. So what we found is most serial killers, not all, but most, do not have that conscience. So based on that avenue in itself, would you believe that these questions, as so many have tried to say, were connected to committing a murder? So just another avenue to think about. So if we're saying that this questionnaire was based on committing a crime, I can understand that. This is, you're going to go break into a house, you're going to go rob somebody, you're going to go steal from somebody's car, you're going to, go rob a bank, all this stuff. I can see it. But as far as murder, I don't see that these questions would be pertinent to any of that. I really don't. Because this has everything to do with thoughts and feelings. Thoughts and feelings. Thinking and feeling. Thinking and feeling. Thinking and feeling. Thoughts and feelings. So that says to me conscience. Conscious. What do y'all think about that? Doesn't that say conscious? Conscience? Because if you have thoughts and feelings about something, that means that you have the ability to pull out of the situation. Even if your feelings were of exoneration, you were happy, you were elated, you were this, that, and the other. Could that mean that you were a killer? Or could that mean that you were just a criminal? Because like what I was showing you guys the other day, as far as the differences between a psychopath and a sociopath, the psychopath has no conscience. The psychopath has no conscience. The sociopath has the ability to stop what they're doing and actually think about it and try to get better. They're impulsive to the fact that they're unable to go back to what they don't want to do, whether it be sell drugs, get quick money, things of that nature. But as far as hurting somebody again, they have the ability to formulate that thought or action in their brain to overcome that desire. They actually see, hey, you know what? My behaviors, my attitude toward my family, all this has caused so much problems. I'm going to stop doing it. I might not be able to stop getting high. I might not be able to stop committing crime, but I can at least not hurt my family in the process. So that is progress. Is this making sense at all, guys? If it is, put a 1. If not, put a 2. I can't figure anyone else that I've tried it, but IgG is used to rule out suspects, so no mistake before the arrest. I'm trying to still to explain why is the DNA there. The sheet's a movable item. He could have touched it in a store, decided not to buy it, and someone came along, got it. Anytime we pay with cash, get that we take home other DNA. Thank you so much. 2-1 so far. Because I mean, in reality, there's been so much made of this case that individuals, they want to take every little piece of information that we get and they want to put it in the place of, yes, he's the guy. And I'm not saying he is the guy or he's not the guy. I'm just pointing out differences to give you a different outlook rather than be one-dimensional, because we're all capable of making up our own minds one way or the other, and if you believe he's innocent, then that's your belief. I'm not going to challenge it. I'm just going to give you information that could possibly make you think different, even if it doesn't change your mind. At least you think, well, you know what, there is something different out there, rather than just this one point that I've thought of all these years. So I want to show y'all one more thing. I'm getting kind of long as far as time, but I want to show y'all one more thing that I've been thinking about, and I want to talk a little bit about this because this is important. Well, of course, we all want to wait for the trial, and hopefully the right thing happens. This says, during the processing of the crime scene, investigators found the latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by ISP forensic team by first using a presumptive blood test and then amino black, a protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. The detected shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern similar to the pattern of a van type of shoe just outside the door of DM's bedroom, located on the second floor. This is consistent with DM's statement regarding the suspect's path of travel. Okay, let me ask you this before I show this little bit of the video. Okay? Many individuals, when I'm looking at this information that I'm gathering and research, many individuals, they don't focus on the question to ask about that latent shoe print. They're focusing on the fact that, why did they miss it the first time? Why didn't they get it the second time? Was it cleaned up? Is that why they didn't get it? This, that, and the other. You know what I mean? It's like they're not focused on these questions that I'm about to ask you. And I'm sure there are some people that ask these questions. I don't know everybody on the planet or have been prevalent to their thought process. But think about this. What size was that shoe print? I've heard different variations. I've heard that it was a size 9. I've heard that it's a 8.5. Okay, so if that was the size, and that was the route that the supposed killer took, and the individual that's locked in jail right now for these 4 quadruple murders does not wear a size 9 or an 8.5. Logically speaking and thinking, could this be his shoe print? I'm asking you guys a question based on what I just said. Do you know what size shoe Mr. Koberger wears? Because I know when they arrested him, they were quick to zoom in on his shoes. Hell, they were even saying those Jackie Chan that he was wearing were Vans. Like hungry vultures wanting to perpetuate food being thrown out for them to eat, even if it's old and dead and decrepit, they still want to feast on it. So let me ask you a question. If this individual does not wear size 9 or size 8.5, hell, even if it's a 10, I don't think it was bigger than that. And you find this Van shoe print, would it not be logical theory to look at Occam's razor again at the proximity of whose shoe print this might have been? Not pertaining to the crime. Just because the latent shoe print is there does not mean that that shoe print automatically has something to do with the crime. So, who lives in that room? A female. She's rather tall. So, most tall people have big feet. I really don't know people that have little feet that are tall. I mean, it could happen, but most females have shoe sizes between, I would say, anywhere from 8.5 to probably bigger, depending on whatever height they are. So Dylan was a pretty tall female. I would say about 5'9", 5'10", right? So chances are she would have a bigger shoe. Could it have been Dylan's shoe print? And then we have Bethany. She's a shorter statured female, so her shoe size would probably be smaller. Or she could have a big foot. Who knows? There you go, Rhonda. You're 5'3" and you wear 7. So therefore, there's no telling. But what I am trying to bring to surface here is I've heard Mr. Koberger wears a 13. So if that shoe print was not a 13 or a 12, or even anything bigger than that, could you possibly take a size 13 foot and stuff it in a size 9 or an 8.5 Vans shoe and not have any of your foot sticking out? Answer me that, chat. Could you do that? If you can answer that, then you can tell me how that would be possible, because these are the ways that you get into that mindset. You're thinking, okay, there has to be other ways. You guys are very inquisitive. So when you're looking at something, you put a lot of effort into trying to figure it out, but you have to ask the right questions. And they start with these 4 questions, okay? What happened? Who was there? When did it happen? And how did you find the evidence? Those 4 things will tell you a lot about evidence. There's nowhere in any of that where there is a why. And that shocked me that Brian used the word why in his questionnaire, because in criminal justice, we're taught not to use the why question, because there's never one specific answer for that why question. So ask yourself about that latent shoe print. Do some research on whether or not you can find out what size Mr. Koberger wears? And would you be able to stuff that big a foot in a small shoe? And if you can't, just like in the OJ trial, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. Well, let's talk a little bit about her because she really, we're not going to bash her, okay? We're not going to bash Bethany. But let's ask a little bit about the reasoning behind not putting any information in the PCA about her whereabouts. Because I'm sure they asked her straight up, what did you do on that evening? Where were your whereabouts? What did you do? Who were you with? Because y'all forget this too. When you're questioning or witness or something, you ask an alibi for them as well. Okay? Especially I would almost bank on those two having that question after them. Well, what's your alibi? Can anybody put you anywhere else at the time of the murders, or were you texting anybody? Were you talking to anybody? Do you have any? Were you playing video games? Were you doing anything that can place you as one of the people that would possibly commit these murders? Yes, I'm going to play that video a little bit. I'm getting there. I'm just long-winded now that I'm awake. But think of that a little bit. You know, that where her whereabouts is going to be brought into the trial. Because how can you be saying you were at home all night, but can you prove it? How were you not out riding around? Did you leave your home at any time? Did she turn her phone off at any point of the night and then turn it back on? Did Bethany do that? Because if they did that at all, would that be suspicious? If her movement contradicts what she states in the PCA or any of the questions that was asked of her, then it's a problem. But we haven't been pertinent to any of that information, so we don't know if it's actually a problem or not. She could actually be under suspicion without anybody ever knowing it other than the police. The same thing with Bethany. But the simple fact that we don't know, we assume that they've been questioned, they've been cleared, and that's the end of it. Well, when you have an investigation going, you've been cleared for the moment. Doesn't mean that they can't recall you and re-ask you questions or even find some different evidence to put your name back out there and ask you, hey, what about this? We found this. You didn't tell us about this. That's true. Was she opening that door to go get a sandwich in the kitchen? Was she hungry and then she heard that noise? I mean, because we're taking it to mean she heard the door specifically to look outside of it. And I've heard people say, well, she was just a nosy bee or she was this and that and the other. You know what? You ever like wake up and you think you hear something and you open your front door to look, or you look out the people, or you look out a window because you thought you heard something and there's nothing, and then you hear it again and then you hear something else again? By the third time, you're kind of looking more in depth on the situation or the scenario. So therefore, that could have possibly happened. What if she was opening that door to go to the bathroom and it stopped and said, oh shit, what's that? Who is that? Or why is there so much yelling? Why is someone whimpering? What the hell? I'm here to help you. What's that about? Yeah, it's very true. I mean, we all get to that point where just like a while ago when I started the video, I started this video like right out of a sleep. So I don't know if you can tell the difference, but my voice is a lot more active, a lot more fluid thinking. Because when I first started this video, I felt like I was all over the place. Like I could not conceive a fluid thought to save my life. So if she awoke out of a sound sleep, you hear noise above you, and you feel that it's your roommate playing with her dog. Those of you with animals, what does that sound like to you, especially on a wooden floor? Because that's what they had in the dorm room or that house were wooden laminate flooring. And it wasn't the real wood. So the wood would not have made the solid sound that real wood makes. These floors would have had a kind of, depending on whether the dog had long nails, short nails, any nails, you would have heard, the scratching on the floor of the dog running across the floor. You would have heard him landing, which would have been either loud, soft, or medium, depending on how heavy. Does this make sense? Talk to me, guys. Does this make sense about the dog? She heard what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog. So what was that dog doing? Was it jumping up and down, trying to get out of Kaylee's bedroom? That's the sound she heard? It was running back and forth because it heard the owner being attacked? Is that the sound she heard? Because I don't have an animal. Even though you hear a little puppy outside, that dog is as mean as all get out. It doesn't like me. It barks. Here's the sound of my voice and starts barking manically like that. So any of you that have small animals, small dogs, what does that sound like? What does playing with your dog sound like? Because if we're using that terminology, hey, what's up, Sarge? Nice to see you here. What does that terminology infer? What does it mean to you? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. If I'm playing with my dog, what does that mean? The dog jumping off the bed, the dog running across the floor, sliding, hitting the door, trying to get out, scratching on the door, barking, whimpering. See, she didn't say the dog was whimpering. She said she heard what sounded like Kaylee was playing with her dog. Hey, Sarge, if you can keep it clean, I'll invite you up, man. I mean, I'd like to hear your version of that. That way we can get another perspective. I'll send a link to your email. Okay. So check your email. I'll send a link to your email. So think about that, guys. What does that sound like? Playing with her dog. So you're woken from a sound sleep and you're playing with the dog. Yeah, I'm gonna invite him up and let him speak a little bit. I guess I'll do the casting on another video this weekend. So if you guys tune in, we'll talk about the casting, and I'll even bring up some more photos that I had that could have been shown as casting evidence. But let's talk about that a little bit as far as hearing the dog. There he is, the one and only, the man, the myth. I thought you would be on Golf Inspector's channel right now.
No, I'm not going to go up there.
No,
I was invited by both Corey and or Rory and Golf, but I have to have a discussion with Rory before I would engage like that.
Right. I understand that. Well, welcome up. I haven't seen you in a while.
I was in here the other day. You had a guest. I've been in here. I come in and out.
Okay.
You had a guest, a young woman that was up here talking about the IDAHO4. I made comments in the.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's hear your take on that, because I've heard it. You know, you've spoken it on other streams we've had together. So in no way is this victim bashing or anything. Like I told you guys earlier in the chat, we like to discuss different variations of Occam's razor. You know, the close proximity of the individuals closest to the crime. So instead of looking at the groundskeeper that may have been, you know, trimming bushes that night at 2:30 in the morning on campus, let's look at the individuals that are actually in the house that could have actually had something very important to say or have left it unsaid.
Well,
So sorry, with that kind of opening, go ahead and speak on what you'd like to say.
I say that based on what I've read and witnessed, that the accusations against Koberger are being chopped down like a tree. Okay. And when you look at the statements of Dylan Mortensen in the PCA in relation to the accusations against Mr. Koberger, everything she says to me is highly suspect because it's so convenient that it makes her an innocent wallflower. And her statements are directly create that picture. And because she's an attractive, tall, blonde girl, a college student, people give her the benefit of the doubt. And I refuse to do that. I refuse to give Bethany the benefit of the doubt. I refuse to give anybody that was in that premises that we can confirm without a doubt was in the premises any benefit of the doubt until all the facts are in. And in her situation, her description of the perpetrator defined herself until she said clad in black, wearing a black mask with bushy eyebrows. But everything prior to that describes Dylan. How is it that a dog sounds like it's being played with when there's a double homicide happening across the hall from it? And its owner, its master, its love of its life is being murdered. And that sounds like a dog being played with? I have a problem with that statement. On its face, it makes zero sense at all. What do you think?
I can stand behind that. I mean, the fact that you said, you know, you and I have discussed this, and I've heard you say this on other shows as well as your own. You know, the deflection factor as far as her describing herself instead of just putting other things out there to kind of deflect. Well, this could have been me, but yeah, I'm going to throw this a little bit in to kind of confuse the whole situation. Is that basically what you're saying right now?
What I'm saying is there's as much of a likelihood that Dylan was aware and or involved in what happened that night as there is a likelihood that she had nothing to do with it. I think it's even ground here. And the reason I say that is the 8 hours of time, the knife sheath. That knife sheath, folks, whether you want to accept it or not, that it was left behind is a massive, massive problem. That kind of a weapon, if being wielded for the act of murder, would not be carried sheath and blade as a unit and carried into a home. It would not be. You would either enter that property without the sheath, or the sheath would be securely fastened to your belt as it was designed to be. It's insane that ended up on the bed. And it's funny that people don't really give it much of a thought.
So now that we talked about playing with the dog, okay, the whimpering and the crying, that was the second door. door opening, correct? That was the second one, and then she heard, "I'm here to help. It's okay. I'm here to help." Right? Something of that nature.
That's what she's saying.
Okay,
And I wonder
so
if that wasn't said to her.
okay,
I wonder if that wasn't said directly to her. But what they meant they were here to help wasn't they were here to help her or to help these victims, but they were here to create the victims. That's when I see. Unfortunately, folks, it's fair to take facts, regardless of who provided them, and look at them through both, shiny eyes and the eye of suspicion. Everybody is a suspect until they're not.
right.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. That really does.
So it's possible it's as likely she had nothing to do with this at all, and everything she said is true. That's 100% likely, but it's also 100% likely that all of what she's saying shows and tells a story that's contradictory to what we've been pushed. The state has pushed and the media has pushed on us that Koberger did it. Now he could have done it. Maybe he said that to her. Maybe she was conscious that he was there to do that, or he was there to come clean up for the 8 hours. I don't know. Right? There's so many
Correct. Well,
possibilities you
let
can
me
run.
ask you this. Let me ask you this, Sarge. If
Mhm.
you made a good point the last time you were on the panel, and you said what made her so scared that she was in a frozen shock phase. Okay,
Mhm.
you remember making that statement?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so before that, if you saw somebody or you heard somebody say, "It's okay, I'm here to help," and then the next thing you see is somebody walking towards you, would you not scream your bloody head off, or you'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" Or unless you knew the person.
Right. And she
How
claims
could
she
you
didn't
be that
recognize or know.
Do what?
She said that she didn't know her nor recognize the person, right?
Okay,
She don't know
well, if she didn't know him, did she recognize the voice that stated, "I'm here to help you"? There was no mention of that.
No. But someone's saying law enforcement would have her. She would have never survived the FBI interrogation. Listen, first of all, we don't even know that this woman was treated as a suspect, and that's the first big problem. Secondly, when you take every statement she made and you look at it from both sides of the coin, every story has two sides. You're only hearing her side of the story, but is there another side? Is she covering for someone or herself? If you can't honestly make that thought and then look if that thought holds any water, or is it a bucket with no bottom? Fair enough.
Fair enough.
And I think when you walk down her statements, the fact that she was in frozen shock phase and had the capacity to retreat into the room and close and lock the door, but not call 911 is a suspicious statement. It's a suspicious action. When your body goes into fight or flight, I understand that. Something triggered that. She had heard noises that she's trying to explain in this PCA, but in conjunction with those noises and now seeing a strange man that caused you to jump to the fight or flight and you fucking fled, excuse me for swearing, right? And you locked your door, yet you didn't call for help, whether it be a friend, a neighbor, a roommate, or the police, is a problem. It doesn't seem to be that people can't understand. You can't have it both ways like that. Do you follow me?
Yes. I mean, and to be fair, at the very beginning, there was a lot of pushback on Dylan. I remember that there was 8 hours in between. Did she clean it up? Did her and Bethany clean it up? I could see that there was a lot of pushback, and in the beginning, I agreed with that as well, because I never understood the time, the frozen shock phase, and then all of a sudden the next thing you hear about is coming out of the room, calling people over, and then going and looking and finding an unconscious person.
Right. And from the PCA itself, from 4 a.m. is when this started until 11:56 a.m. That's 8 hours, folks. Now you could cut that down. You could say, well, the crime ended at 4:25. So now you're down to 7 hours and 35 minutes. That in and of itself is an obvious issue, but all of her statements don't fit a victim. They just don't, in my opinion. They fit somebody that was either knowledgeable, and I had said, or involved when they came out, and their initial response to what they witnessed was an act of passion, right? That was the first thing. And then they said, well, the house was a target. Well, clearly that statement can't be accurate if there were 6 people in the house and only 4 people were attacked. I have a problem with the house being the target. Makes little sense based on what the results were. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So,
yeah.
So, when you go through and look at what's in that PCA, which now we're being told is irrelevant, right? By the very people that had every news media tell you it was the most comprehensive written PCA they'd ever read. How many people said that? How many lawyers? How many streamers? And yet everything that's alleged in that PCA to this point, Ann Taylor has effectively erased. And what are you left with then? You're left with what other parts of the crime scene are factually available to us. And that ends up being Bethany and Dylan. And Dylan did all the talking. And I just cannot make what she has stated make sense in her being uninvolved. Can you?
Well, it sounds like she was jumping back and forth from a lot of different events that were happening, and with good reason. I mean, she was just traumatized, supposedly, through this situation. I don't see how she got any statement to make sense. But in the PCA, it never really sounds fluid enough that this is what I heard. It always has a conjuncture that ask that question. Okay, well, where's the rest of it? You only gave us so much. Where's the rest of it?
Right. Listen,
have you gotten a feeling about that as well throughout the times that you've read the PCA and gone over and everything? Like, there's only so much that was given to the public.
Well, I said it, and this is the fact. I only got involved in true crime because of that PCA. That was the only reason I tuned in to any channel. Dagos was the first one. Somehow he came up. I don't know how I ended up in there, but that's one of the first ones I went into. And I went into several others. Jules, there's a number of people out there. And I followed their narratives. And then, but here's what bothered me in the PCA. There is no actual fact in the PCA stated or provided. There's no statement of fact. There's no evidence of fact. And that's what attracted me to this case. Okay.
Well, you also said on some other panels that I've heard you on is it's a total contradiction. Every time that there's a statement made, then there's circumstantial evidence.
Right. For every accusation they make, they provide a reasonable fucking doubt explanation.
Yeah, reasonable doubt. That's what I mean.
Right. Yeah. So everything they allege, they then go on in the same sentence and then give the man reasonable doubt. When they make the statements that he turned off his phone, right?
Yeah.
There's no evidence that he did that. You're making an assessment. You're guessing. It's a theory. It's an idea. There's no proof. There's no evidence. There never will be, unless Brian physically comes out and tells you, "Yeah, I turned off my phone." Right. Then later they go on. Now they tell you that they pick his phone up 28 minutes after the crime. So now you know for a fact that they had no way to know where Mr. Koberger was for those 2 hours and 28 minutes. So that right there is reasonable doubt. He could say he was on the moon. And there's no way you could disprove him, right? Well, the moon's a little crazy, but you follow what I mean? He's now saying he was at a park. We now learned that the 12 previous trips that he made in that area at similar times of the night and similar routes, they made that look like that meant he went by that house 12 times. We now know that those similar drives and routes all took him down to that park. Right?
Right.
So they took.
Do you believe did you watch a little bit of that hearing yesterday where they were asking that detective, did he keep any notes? Did he have any kind of backup to his information that he was, investigating? And he said he did not. How could you not?
It was going to be presented to a grand jury, and how you wouldn't preserve evidence that you're presenting to a grand jury is a bit stunning to me.
Yeah.
Preservation of evidence is key in a prosecution, whether it be for robbing a liquor store or a four fucking person homicide. Excuse my language again. I had a tough night in my stream tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, I made it that way though. It was good. It was a good tough, but it was.
Oh, it was a good tough night, huh?
Yeah, it was a good tough
Okay.
night. But you see, and you cannot continue to tell me different things about Mr. Koberger, and then later on we find out that these things actually have no relation to the crime whatsoever. Those 12 other trips have no relation to the crime. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that whole talk in there that he stalked him, and that one streamer drove out on some road, was it Gray Hughes or someone like that, and taking pictures through the woods, all bullshit. Because people weren't sensible enough to parse the data that was given them. When I read it, I not only saw accusations, but I saw no proof, I saw no evidence, and with every accusation, I saw a reasonable doubt argument. I said right in the beginning, Brian Koberger's alibi will be those 12 other trips. He will admit to them, and those 12 other trips will show that they never took him to King Road. And that's essentially what ended up happening by Ann Taylor's motions, right?
So here's a question for you, Sarge. And I know we've yet to have a trial, and we're barely moving through this, like watching two fish fuck. You know, just watching paint dry.
We're watching through molasses is what we're doing.
Yeah, molasses.
Right.
You know, it's pretty slow pace, but hopefully we'll get to a trial. And you know, the more I look into this, and the more that I see the early stuff being stated and talked about in the videos, it almost seems like reality was the reality was that there was a lot of inept evidence gathering. Yeah. So if that was the case in this case, maybe that's the secrecy that they're pushing right now, is because a lot of it was inept. They didn't gather the information correctly. There wasn't a chain of custody on a lot of the evidence. Maybe they were rushing. Excuse me?
They went to the crime scene in blue jeans and windbreakers.
Yeah,
in COVID masks.
Yeah, and that is just me talking right there, because based on a lot of the photos that I've seen, and there was news crews everywhere. They contaminated the area.
Right.
How long?
80% of the dust in your 80% of the dust in your home is dead skin cells, transfer DNA.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I did not.
80% of the dust in your home, and that Ann Taylor needs to drive that in like a stake through the heart of a vampire. 80% of the dust in your house is your body losing microscopic DNA. You lose 5 billion pieces of microscopic skin. 5,700 a second is falling off your fucking body. If you could see yourself under a magnified lens, you would look like, all of us would look like Pigpen walking around from Charlie Brown. That's the human condition.
There's some people that do.
Right? I do want to make a special point, though. This would be the first time I think I've ever said this in public.
Okay.
I do know what suspect vehicle 1 is. I do know why it says suspect vehicle 1.
Okay.
And it says suspect vehicle 1 because it's a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra that they identified on King and Queen Road. That is suspect vehicle 1. The other suspect vehicle is Brian Koberger's 2014 to 2016 Elantra that they caught on cameras in other places. Okay. And they caught on cell phone banks. That's why they're using suspect vehicle 1. That's why it's being identified that way. Now, that's not to say Brian wasn't in that car. Remember, they said suspects or people or persons in that vehicle are of interest to them. But I promise you here that the term suspect vehicle 1 is referring to the factually identified vehicle by an FBI examiner as a 2011 to 13 Hyundai Elantra. The same vehicle that you saw in Linda Lane is the 11 to 13 Elantra. That is suspect vehicle 1. And that's why it's noted that way in the PCA.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense.
right? I mean,
So
Coke
that's
Ocean,
the car. That's the car that we discussed that night, going the wrong way at the wrong time, right?
no,
That's the
no,
one.
no, 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 no.
No,
It's
that's
not
the
that.
other car.
So when you look at the information that's been released, there is another location that they use to identify the 14 to 16 Elantras, like Indian Hills Lane or something. Okay,
Okay.
right? So that identification is an Elantra 14 to 16, or they used the location that Ann alluded to, which was some smoke shop. Okay, going the wrong way at the wrong time. So there's a couple of different locations where there was another vehicle that they identified that may, in fact, and I'm sure Kohlberger's going to admit to it. Yeah, that was me. I promise you, he's going to admit to it because that places him in an area that makes it impossible for him to have committed the crime. I swear
True.
to you, that's what he's going to say. That's
Of
his
course.
alibi, right?
Of
Suspect
course.
vehicle 1. Everybody's been struggling with trying to understand that statement. And I promise you that statement refers to the 11 to 13 that the FBI agent identified.
Hey,
Linda West.
let me shoot something by you, Sarge, and this just
Sure.
popped in. It just popped into my head. There's
Head
two
popper.
vehicles. There's two vehicles, and I don't like speculation, but this came into my mind. What if Kohlberger was in the area,
Mhm.
but wasn't part of the crime? He was merely a voyeur. He's watching it like he was watching a movie. You know what I mean? Like with the questionnaire, it's almost like he's intrigued to the point where he can't look away from a scenario happening. Like he's infatuated with the thought of. And based on the question, because I mean I've had to ask those same questions myself in my classes, but I'm not infatuated with how a murder is committed. I'm not infatuated to the point where
No.
I want to go watch one happen or, interview a killer and say, well, how were you feeling? What were you thinking? What
But
if
you're
he
not in the
was
line, but you're not in the line of work that he was studying either.
right? Exactly. I'm not doing the forensics.
And
You're
that's
right.
that's key. That's key to see. That's the other thing that's always kind of offended me. Like I've got a really, really colorful past, okay, to say the least. And if you look at me through that lens, then you wouldn't bring me up on this panel. You just wouldn't. You'd be an idiot. If that's
Right.
who I was, if I was still that man that I used to be, no. And the problem I've always had with how the internet handles people is, hasn't anybody ever just tried to sit back and ask themselves, let's look at Brian Kohlberger outside of the crime. There is no crime. And let's just look at what we know about Kohlberger and then ask a simple question. Do those acts and do those things that we're aware of suggest any impropriety that would make him a killer or send him down that path? And I don't see anything in his past. As a matter of fact, we had a big discussion about addiction. And I'm going to say this again. Addiction is suicidal, not genocidal.
Right.
Okay? Addiction is a slow suicide. And anybody embroiled in a drug addiction knows that, whether they admit it or not. That's the truth of it. I'm a recovered addict. So addiction, especially heroin, is a slow suicide. And you're suicidal, not genocidal. So you
Right.
have to consider that when you look at this suspect. I think that would be right. That's a fact that we have. He had a drug issue, right? So he had schooling. He did good at school. He did the school through school. He did whatever college he did in Pennsylvania. Then that woman, one of the few people, only 2 people she's ever recommended to go to this school.
Yeah.
And she had all but good stuff to say about Kohlberger. Do all of those stories amount to somebody that you would naturally suspect would their first crime be a 4-person homicide?
Right.
And the answer is, in fairness, if you look at Kohlberger all by himself and take the crime away, no. There's nothing in there that would even suggest that this guy is capable of doing that, would want a desire to do that, or had any intent to do that. Look at him for who he is as a human being first. Do the same
Well,
thing
you're
with
right.
everybody else in this scene, right?
You're right. But many people, as Ann stated, have created a narrative about him that it's going to be almost damn near impossible for him to shake whether he's guilty or innocent. Because, people have already labeled him an incel. They've labeled him, creepy and weird and standoffish and a hard, angry person and a bully and, all that stuff. So think about, even if he beats this, okay, even if he's able to be found innocent, his life,
trial. I don't think it'll make it.
his life will never be the same.
No, this guy's ruined forever. And here's the other thing too, and this is my biggest fear, and I said this a long time ago, that this gentleman may have in fact committed this crime and he's going to get off. Okay, I don't know, and I don't argue his guilt or innocent. I never argued whether he did it or not. Well, let me just say this. I have said I'm convinced he didn't, because the PCA timeline matches the Linda Lane video, and there's no way that can't be an 11 to 13 Elantra. Okay, there's just no way it can't be, because of the way they served us the information. They told us what that car was. They told us where that car actually was that they were looking for. It wasn't so much that they wanted an 11 to 13 Elantra. They wanted one that was in the area of the crime scene. And where would a car in the area of the crime scene be? On a road directly related to the crime scene, right? So we know based on their story that that is an 11 to 13. And for people to make the excuse, well, the FBI made a mistake. No. And the proof of that is it's called Suspect Vehicle 1, not Brian Kohlberger's car. Why isn't it called, what is he now? He's not a suspect. He's the perpetrator's car. Why isn't it referred to as that?
Good question.
If that was Brian Kohlberger's car, without a doubt, they would have said Mr. Kohlberger's car proceeded on King Road at 3:32 a.m. Everything they said about that car would be ascribed to Kohlberger, not Suspect Vehicle 1.
That's true. That's your own point there. They would have given that car a label.
Correct. So there's a lot of chaos in that case that's caused by the authorities. And whether the kid did it or not, I don't think this will make, I don't really think it's going to go to trial. My prediction is it doesn't make it, that it gets destroyed by motions.
Well, the fact that it's a death penalty case, you don't think that, you don't think that it's substantial enough to, if he pleads or if it doesn't make it to trial, they're still going to try to find something to get him on.
I don't know that they can. I mean, here's the problem they're going to have. If we take the information that we have at face value, which is just so people know, this is my way of thinking. Okay. And I think it's correct, but you have information that has yet to be contradicted when it comes to Ann Taylor's motions, right? And one of her motions, the prosecution, for whatever reason, admitted Kohlberger wasn't stalking, and the judge said he wasn't stalking. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. So as more and more of these pieces of allegations get torn apart, what you're going to be left with is transfer DNA. And 80% of the dust in your house is your skin cells. Okay? So that being the case, the transfer DNA becomes all by itself useless. It becomes unprosecutable, no matter where you found it, because you can't explain how it got there. In your wildest imagination, you just can't. You could dream of ways, you could theorize, but there's no evidence that you could provide that would put Brian Kohlberger's DNA on there, either for nefarious, casual, recreational, by accident, happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, Golf Spectre, thank you for joining us. I hope you had a great show. I'll have to go check it out tomorrow on replay.
So I think it comes down to the DNA itself. If they're going to be left with that, and I don't think that that's something you could bring to trial.
Well, even in the beginning, Sarge, when we were first hearing the evidence that they had against them, a lot of it seemed circumstantial. Whenever you hear some people leave out the trace part, they wanted you to believe it was mitochondrial DNA, the way they were pressing that forward. But when you found out it was trace DNA, then you're like, well, wow, that's just like half the other stuff that they're talking about. It's not relevant unless they can put him in the house. They can put him in the vicinity. Occam Drazer, what was his relative connectivity to these four victims? Because they say targeted.
They've already said there is no connectivity between Koberger and the victims, electronic or otherwise.
Okay, I remember hearing that. Yes, I do.
Okay.
So that being stated, so one little bit like that, is that enough to free the man?
I don't think freedom. I think what happens, folks, is that we don't know how our systems work as Americans. It's sad, but the justice system is a very, very slow process. I went to court 9 different times for an accusation that was false, and the DA kept trying to push it. And as a matter of fact, the DA would substitute in assistant DAs who didn't know what was going on to keep it going. And they played all these games like I was going to plead guilty to something I didn't do. Or they don't know me, okay? But in the end, I had to go through those 9 hearings over a course of months to finally get the case dismissed. That's the process that you must go through. Koberger is in that process, and it's not, you don't want to be in that process, especially when you're accused of this crime where there's no way you could be let out on bail. You're trapped. You're done.
I do have a thought that this crime was so rushed to get a suspect, whether he's the one or whether he's not. I believe it was rushed because there was so much at stake for that community. You know, there was so much at stake for that community, and there was so much push to getting the guy. So whoever the guy was, you have to make it fit. Like I heard somebody say, I don't know if it was you, but they worked the case backwards. Instead of the evidence going forward, they worked the case backwards. Once they arrested him, then they started getting the evidence and putting it all together and making it fit rather than.
But they didn't get any evidence. Restate that. They started to look for the evidence that they could not provide. They couldn't produce it. They couldn't find it.
To elaborate on that, what evidence did they not produce?
So evidence that they couldn't produce was any connection between Brian and the victims. Brian's travels never had anything to do with stalking them. And there was no DNA connected from the victims to Brian Koberger in his car, his apartment, his home in Pennsylvania, or his workplace in Washington at the college. So everything they went to go seek to solidify that PCA is useless. There's nothing to connect him to the story in the PCA is not describing Brian Koberger, people, at all. As a matter of fact, I'm highly doubtful that anybody that drove an Elantra or any white vehicle had anything at all to do with the crime in that house. That crime was done some other way. I can't tell you how, and I'm not going to try to pretend like I can.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question, Sarge. I started this a little bit in the beginning. I don't know how when you came into the stream, but in the beginning, I was talking about the frats. Do you support that avenue, or do you believe that's a rabbit hole as well?
I sneezed and I didn't hear you. I turned off my mic and sneezed. Say that again.
Okay. In the beginning of this stream, I was talking about the frats. I was talking about a fight that occurred based on this frat member that was acting creepy or, out of the sorts with Maddie and Kaylee. They reported him to Ethan, who reported it to the Sigma Chi uppers. Well, they didn't let him into the frat after months of hazing, and it kind of went from there. Then the murders happened, and this, that, and the other. Or he started a fight with Ethan at the party, supposedly, or at the frat house. They didn't say party, but at the frat house. Ethan and Dana left, so they wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. And then the murders happened, and this, that, and the other. That was a rumor that was circulating early on, very, very hardcore. This was even before the David Loach, the other David scenario that happened. There's a little bit of truth in everything that's stated. So, do you support the frat angle, or do you think it's just a rabbit hole?
No, I don't support any other ideas that are based on pure internet supposition.
Okay.
If you have no fact to support it, I don't want to engage in it. And I think
Okay.
more of it should try to accept that as an understanding. You're dealing, unfortunately, with civil. This is a civil or a criminal case, a judicial issue. You're dealing with specific things and there's specific requirements. And when you do that, can I allege that somebody at the grub truck had something to do with it? Certainly I could, but I have nothing available to me that I can put my eyes on to make that connection, except you have to assume that that's what I mean. It's a theory, it's a story with no foundation. Could it
Right.
have been a frat house? Sure. Could it have been some lunatic coming through town? Sure. Could it have been someone they know? Sure. Could it have been Brian? Based on the PCA? No. Could it have been him otherwise? Sure. He could have turned off his phone, parked his car in a parking lot, and walked to the house. I mean, there's a billion possibilities, but there's no evidence to support them as truth or viable topics. So I
And
don't.
didn't you feel that? Didn't you feel that in the very beginning, whenever you found out that it was Brian? I remember seeing him, hearing about his history, this, that, and the other. And my first question was, how the fuck did they get this guy out of everybody on the planet that we've been talking about? How did this guy just automatically jump ahead of all of them? How do you put him that close to those four?
Can I just say that even now golf has made a point that there's a witness. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know that that's accurate, but let's just say that it's accurate. What good is the witness? Because everything else that you've told us is inaccurate. There's no supporting fact to show he stalked them girls. None. But that was your allegation of the PCA. Those were the reasons you went to arrest this guy. Let's be clear. That PCA is much, much more than just a document of accusation. That's a document that took a man off the street and locked him in a cell. That's a formal capacity to charge him with a quadruple homicide and felony burglary. That's serious, bro. So everything in there better have some supporting evidence somewhere. And shouldn't you collect that before you actually write the document to go get this guy? Shouldn't you have known there was no DNA from the victims connected to Koberger in any way, shape, or form? Shouldn't you have questioned him? Shouldn't you have swabbed him? Shouldn't you have investigated him before you levied these charges on him?
Exactly. I mean, how many other investigations of other serial killers did they at least bring them in to question? Their name popped up. Hey, your name's been brought to our attention because of this, that, and the other. Would you like to answer some questions?
They wouldn't even have to do that. They would just have to knock on his door and say, "Excuse me, sir, but there was an elantra that we had seen at the scene. Can we have a conversation with you?" I mean, you could be so non-intrusive and so friendly. The kid was a professor and a teacher's assistant to a professor in a college teaching criminology, studying the most difficult, by far, aspect of criminology, which is the cloud. Okay? Cloud forensics.
They didn't do that. None of them.
Not do that. And that's what I'm saying. And this is something, viewers that think he's guilty, you need to ask yourself this question and be fair. If you knew that there was no stalking based on his 12 drives, if you knew there was no electronic connection between him and any of the victims, and if you knew that not a single piece of trace evidence of the victims were anywhere connected to Brian Koberger, would you have arrested him? I think the answer is a universal no. No. You mean to tell me these police didn't know that those 12 trips were not the 12 trips to go look at that house? But they put it in there anyway. That's what I mean. These police departments and the people that represent us do things that make no sense, and they do things that are not accurate. They don't do them in the right order. And what are we as a society doing? We're just watching it and being outraged over it.
Well, the one thing that I believe that some of the individuals in these chats don't understand the grand jury indictment. They believe it was almost held like a hearing, which is not. It's an investigative hearing to listen to what the prosecution has against this individual to form an indictment.
Well, it's funny is the people that think that don't even realize that Ann Taylor brought to the Supreme Court that very argument that in the Constitution of Idaho is how it's supposed to be. What you don't realize, folks, is that in most state constitutions, a grand jury is essentially given a guilty verdict on the data given them. So you have to give them enough information for them to come to the conclusion that if this were an actual trial, they would vote guilty. That's
Right.
what the level of a grand jury indictment is supposed to be. And Ann Taylor in Idaho, what's happened, and even Judge says, well, it's not been like that. He admits that standard hasn't been being followed for 50 years, but it's not being followed because of a Supreme Court ruling, not a legislated law. The law is still the law. And the courts decided not to adhere to that law. Do you follow me?
Yes.
And that's not how your system of government is supposed to work. People should be petitioning their state electors, their state representatives, to enforce the constitutional statements in an indictment. That means that the evidence brought before that grand jury would be, in the grand jury's opinion, something that would convict this person, not something that might have, could have, would have, maybe could have, hey, he could have been doing that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And we say they can indict a ham sandwich. We accept that like that's just normal, but that's not how it's supposed to work.
Of course not. Most individuals don't really realize in today's world that it is no longer innocent until proven guilty. It's guilty until proven innocent. At least it appears that way in a lot of cases.
Right.
Because people's guilt is often pushed more than their innocence.
Well, look at the Salem witch hunts, right?
Yeah.
You're guilty. You're accused of being a witch and you're guilty. You got to prove you're not. And that's exactly what our court system has slowly transpired into over the years of the country.
Yes.
And we, the people, seem to just sit back and like we're helpless and not realizing that we are the government. Our voice could change that. But we have to have a unified voice. But the government is smart. They don't let us have a unified voice. They keep us arguing. Oh, you're a different nationality than me. You're a different color than me. Oh, you sleep with different people than me. You believe in a different God. They keep us arguing about things that should never even be discussed in public.
I was watching a case the other day. I can't really remember what case it was, but the basis of it was these two African Americans were supposedly had tortured this young lady, threw her into the alligator pits, and disposed of her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had interrogated this other guy that was caught on cam, going down that strip. They caught his pickup on cam. They identified there were two people in the vehicle, and they were ready to indict these two African Americans. Right? Well, it comes to later on that it was the guy that they originally interrogated, the white guy, and his girlfriend gave him up, because she wasn't wanting to go down for murder. Well, she gave him up, and he confessed. But they never did anything to say, hey, we're sorry, we got it wrong. This, that, and the other. I mean, they eventually sued the state, but I watch so many that people are almost forced to confess because they need a conviction. I don't think people in general understand that less than 50% of murders are unsolved.
Well, I think less than 50% are solved, you're saying.
Yes, less than 50% are solved. So how quick would some detective who's been on the force for so long and be like, man, we need to solve this one. This is quadruple. We haven't had one in 7 years. We usually solve them when they come before our desk. We need to keep that record going. At all costs, we need to get a perp. We need to figure out a way to solve this. And it's so easy to get tunnel vision. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it's so easy to get tunnel vision, especially if this tip pans out, and this tip pans out, and this tip pans out. Before you know it.
Listen, I'm also concerned that there were 2 passes made through that house, and it was only on the second pass that they claim relevant evidence to this Koberger did it was found. right? That's a problem. Everything that these people did is a problem, and everything they did was unprofessional. When you look at the video and the still photos of the scene, the crime scene being investigated, look at folks. If you're coming into my house to look for something microscopic, you better be in an outfit that provides for that microscopic search. I don't want you coming in here in blue jeans and a ball cap and a windbreaker. You're spreading yours and other people's DNA all over the freaking place. And I don't want you in here looking for microscopic anything now. You've contaminated the crime scene. You can't even present who. Do you follow me? If 14 people go through that house improperly dressed, then you have countless hundreds of DNA samples that you could collect of unknown people that have maybe even just stopped at the same gas station as one of your investigators and left town because they were on their way home somewhere for college, right? It's insane what they did in this case.
So we're talking about evidence right now and contamination. Do you believe the night chief was contaminated? Do you believe that that's actually his trace DNA on there, or do you believe that they got it wrong?
I have two issues with it. One is they had to amplify that through proprietary software. So from what we understand, there were under 20 microscopic cells found. And most places in the country will not even attempt to try to build a profile from that. But Othram apparently has software that lets them amplify as little as 8 microscopic skin cells. And you're not allowed access to that software, which is just un-American. So I have questions as to the identity of Kohberger from that amplification, and then the tree building. And what a lot of folks are not told, because you watch TV and you think DNA is like a fingerprint. A fingerprint does not require statistical analysis. I'm so mad I even have to say this. DNA requires statistical analysis. And what are statistics? 12 gauge?
Yeah. Can you ask that again?
Well, I mean, okay, so if DNA requires a statistical analysis, what does that say about the DNA? What is a statistic? What is that?
It would mean that I would think that you need to break it down to the point of how it's all collaborated together to form the basis on what you're trying to identify.
Right. And so you do a statistical analysis. If you flip a coin 100 times, statistically, it'll show roughly 50-50. It might be 48, 52, but it'll be a close show of 50-50 if you flip a coin randomly 100 times. Fair enough. That's the statistical analysis. But the statistical analysis allows for a room of error. Could be 48 to 52. It could be 45 to 55. It could be 49 to 50. It could be 50-50. That's what a statistical analysis is simply that. There is room for error. A fingerprint, there is no room for error. There is no statistical analysis. The retina of your eye is irrefutably yours, no different than your fingerprint. That's real evidence. That's irrefutable. And people people look at DNA with the equivalency of a fingerprint, and that's where they've been brainwashed. It's not an accurate equivalency. These TV shows have done it to us, right?
Yeah, it's getting to the point. So it's like if a crime does not have DNA attached to it, it's almost like not even solvable, which isn't true. DNA is just one more factor as far as police work to give more activity to solve the crime.
The fact that they sent this sample to Othram tells me that Othram as a specialty in amplification, that the sample that they used, that they collected from that sheet, as they state, they did an SNP profile. Is that the correct letters? There's another one out there, 3 letters. But anyway, to identify it as a male unknown, not in the database. And then it went to Othram. And go look what Othram's specialty is. An amplification of samples. So in that amplification, could you make an error? Could you be biased if you already had Kohberger's name?
Yeah.
Right.
Didn't we hear from that lady Vargas about the loopholes that they do whenever they're doing that kind of analysis?
Yeah. And everything is a statistical analysis, folks. And if your samples have to be created, in other words, this isn't blood or saliva or semen.
Right.
This isn't a digit that was chopped off. There's nothing at that crime scene except dead skin cells, purportedly on the button snap. Okay. So you're talking about a level of DNA and the type of DNA that's everywhere you go, it goes. Everywhere you stop, it goes. So you're shedding this stuff constantly. It's the worst. They used to call it the clown show, just so people know. Not many years ago, it was called the clown show of DNA because of its ability to be transferred. STR, SNP, I get them mixed up, whatever those 2 3-letter things are. Remember? Anyway, do you follow me? You understand that 12 gauge?
Yes, I do. Hey, Twizzle, welcome to the chat, brother. I heard you were at the court hearing yesterday. Hope you got some good insight on that. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Sarge. Totally, man. I mean, it just everything about this case, when you think you have some kind of logic, and then it just, then here comes 3 shades of smokescreen, or.
And here's the thing: is when people refuse to accept reasonable doubt. That to me is an issue. So, to me, transfer DNA gives massive reasonable doubt. If as we're seeing, it becomes the only source of evidence. So he didn't stalk. That's not his car, right? His last 12 trips did not connect to King Road. That trip did not connect to King Road by any way, shape, or form where they can prove it. There's no connection between him and the victims electronically or otherwise. So that kind of that's dead. There's no DNA of the victims anywhere associated with Koberger's entire life. That's a problem, right? So what are you left with? You're left with transfer DNA. And if you could convict the guy on one piece on transfer DNA on a knife sheet, I know it's in a bad place, but people have bad luck.
Yeah.
Right? He's bad luck Koberger. Maybe he'll become the new term for bad luck, right? There are names people have coined for, like if you're Benedict Arnold, that means you're a traitor. He gave up I don't know if you know that, you probably do. But Benedict Arnold, people would call each other if they felt they were being a traitor, their friendship or at work in a union, they'd call you Benedict Arnold. So maybe this will be, if you're unlucky, you're going to be called Brian Koberger.
Well, that could very well be. As far as him and the DNA, I've heard originally, I think Annie Elise was talking about it on one of her videos where she said originally she heard from a detective's wife or a source close to the investigation that the knife sheath was found under Ethan. And regardless of whether it was found there or whether it was found in her
that would make a big difference. That would make a big difference.
You know
why they would make a big difference? Because that would set the strike, was the first strike took place in that room.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean,
don't know who said that. I wouldn't. I think it was written and it was stated factually that knife sheath was found under the young woman. Was it Maddie?
Yeah.
And under her comforter.
Yeah, that's where I had originally heard it as well. But there's been so many conflicting different variations of everything that you've heard. I mean, starting from the coroner saying, hey, they were all asleep when this crime occurred, we came to find out that wasn't true at all. We were told that these 2 females were found, one was on top of the other. And then the family comes out and says, no, that's not true. One was slumped over in the corner of the bed. So it seems like everything we've been told is either a lie or, there's somebody not telling the truth. Somebody's misinterpreting facts. If you're going to speak on something, stick to the original story.
Right. And I wanted to ask you a question about your title. We don't, because I don't want this thing to end and you not cover that, because I have questions on that too. Because again, I understood that there was no GPS in that model elantra.
Yeah, I was wondering that as well. That's why I started the whole thing. is
Okay.
I wanted to show, the capability of whether that Elantra had GPS or whether it didn't. But as far as low jack, I wasn't very familiar on low jack. Are you familiar with that?
Isn't that something that you get put on your vehicle if you were like if there's a manufacturer's warranty, or is it something where if you buy here, pay here for a car?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, if he was the third owner, as some people have stated on here, um, maybe the first two owners had it on there, or maybe it was on there but just wasn't activated. I mean, the police are very secretive when they tore that car apart because they tore it apart with a Q-tip. You know what I mean? They went into it
Right, but that
every,
evidence would have been turned over to Ann Taylor.
of course, and we wouldn't be prevalent to that. That could be some kind of
No,
last
no,
minute.
no, no. I think we'd be highly prevalent to it when she makes the connection that there's no electronic means to connect Koberger to the victims. If a low jack could connect them to that property, that would be an electronic means. You see?
Okay.
So I still take on face value the statement that she's made, and that if there were any electronic device in that car that could identify that location as 1122 Queen Road, then that would be electronic means. So that
Then
statement she made would be
how is that
reversed.
How is that Ray guy gonna demonstrate the alibi then if there's no
Well, his
electronic?
demonstration has got to do with cell phone locations based on cell frequency strength, which would then help predict distance and location. He's going to show you where the towers are. AT&T gives you much more information than the other providers. A lot of what he would go look for is already there.
Okay.
So it would be then an approximation as well. There's if you could put him within a few 500 feet of that, like on Taylor Road, across from where that house is, well, that's close, right? That's right there. Or if you put it on, I don't know the name of the road. I'm just, but the road that, not the road right in front of the house, but the one you drive out to, that main road. If you show Koberger, let's say you could show Koberger's car there, not exactly at the house, but at the right time. That error in calculation would be acceptable. Do you follow me?
Yes.
So if you could show Koberger's car, at least in the immediate vicinity of the home at the times of the crime, and even if it's within 500 or 1,000 feet or even a quarter mile of the home, you can make the argument that his car was there.
Of course.
That's
I mean,
what Sy is going to go after. That's what Sy is looking
that's what we discussed that one night for about an hour and a half, the wrong car at the wrong direction. I mean, it's like heading the wrong direction. But the fact of the matter is, even if it wasn't him, that type of vehicle being caught on that camera, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. It's like if you can plant that seed in the jury,
right?
that's all that's needed. It's not whether it's factual or not. It's about, okay, I gave you a storyline that was believable and you bought it. They can make it. You know what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying?
There's talk that Chris Peterson, they found that there's a bunch of lawyers that go represent people they believe are innocent. Okay, they found eight documents in the possession of the prosecutor. That rumor is, and it's a rumor. Rumor is, it's exculpatory and shows he didn't do it, or at least makes an argument, clear argument that he couldn't do it. So the problem we have in our society is those that are entrusted to do what they're doing always seem to screw things up and then try to cover their ass. Like I said, I went to court 9 times for something that I shouldn't have had to go to court for after the first presentation to the judge. There was no counter argument to my argument that I did not violate an order of protection. That in fact, I was in a room with a person that got an order of protection against me. And I was in that room because I was under court order to be in the room. You see? So how do you violate me? That's what I had to go through. And I had to go to court 9 times to finally the judge said, enough. This guy's making the correct argument. He was going through a divorce. He's supposed to be in that room. Right? So, I didn't touch her. I didn't hit her. Didn't threaten her. I didn't do anything. She said she felt in fear of her life with me there. Well, bitch, you filed a paperwork to put me there. I know You know what I mean? And it took
Yeah.
me 9 trips to court and to get rid of that charge. And then they had to get rid of the restraining order. It was based on a false egg. I'm afraid he's going to get a gun and shoot me. Well, back then I didn't even own a gun. Didn't even have a permit for a gun.
Right.
And that was common. Through the whole marriage, I never owned a gun. She'd never seen me with a gun. You're afraid I'm going to get a gun and shoot? Why? Man, shut up with that noise. They had to drop the restraining order too because it was bullshit.
That's what the scary part of the whole thing is. It's like when we hear these motions, I mean, they're not hearing these motions to compel. You hear from the state, but you mostly hear from the defense. And it's like, okay, what the state not really, I mean, is it just one-sided like that? I haven't reached that part. I haven't reached that part in my studies yet, so I'm kind of ignorant to that fact. That these motions are mostly for the defense's defense side.
Have you ever been to a criminal court and sat and watched, or been on the receiving end of the justice system? Have you ever personally done that? Okay.
No.
The errors that we make as Americans, okay, is if you're charged with something, the amount of money it's going to cost you and time you're going to have to invest to clear your name is offset by the district attorney telling you he's going to give you a slap on the wrist and this will go away and you pay a fine. He gets a conviction. Right. You see? And the other mistake that Americans make is whether they did it or not, they waived their preliminary hearing. The court actually says, would you like me to waive the preliminary hearing? And that's something you should never do, ever, ever, ever. Because the preliminary hearing puts the government on trial, not you. You see? Right. And it's these simple things that make a big difference. So now Twizzlestick said the date, and I did get that right yesterday. For anybody that heard me in my stream, the 19th was what I also heard. It was April 19th that they were rushing to get this stuff done to get a grand jury going. Twizzlestick, he just couldn't. He didn't know he confirmed me, and it wasn't his intent. It wasn't his intent to confirm me, but I heard that myself too because I listened to that hearing yesterday. But back to your GPS stuff. So we went to LoJack. We could be pretty comfortable that doesn't exist, right? Or no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the whole point of doing the stream tonight was starting with that is because I kind of remember a little bit about the car being taken apart and what they were saying about that, and that goes along with what you said as far as Ann Taylor. After they got the car and they took the car apart and everything, they that's whenever she came out and said, there's no physical evidence or any digital or anything, any kind of evidence, blood, anything that links my client to the crime. And that amazed me that his car would be that immaculate. How he would be able to just
wait. It's not just immaculate. It's not just immaculate. There's no reason to explain the lack of evidence.
Right.
That's also was said, which means where's the bleach? Okay, where's the bleach? Remember the commercial with the hamburger?
Yeah,
Where's the bleach? And she would say burger. Where's the beef?
Yeah, where's the beef?
But in this case, it's where's the bleach that was Brian Koberger used to decontaminate his car? Where is it anywhere in his house or anywhere?
Even though it was a month after, so you're telling me that he supposedly the clean freak he was, even a month after, you didn't find any traces of bleach in that car whatsoever? So he didn't bleach that car at all.
Right.
No cleaning product. That car was a mess.
Listen, you took, this is another stupid thing. You took pictures of tire tracks you claim were left the night of the crime. And then you let the guy drive 2,500 miles across the country. Yeah. You didn't even surreptitiously get pictures of his tire tracks. Why didn't you do that?
Yeah, did they do cast impressions on the tires? Were the tires?
No, I guess they took pictures of what they thought to be burning.
Well, I know, but once they got the car, did they do cast impressions? Were they even the same tire? The tire?
I don't even know.
You know what I mean? Did he change? Later, did he get new tires after the crime?
We don't know. We don't know.
Right. But those are some questions. Those are some questions, like I was saying earlier, when you start to look for questions to ask yourself, those are the logical questions to ask.
Shouldn't you have looked at that before the kid left town? You knew his name in December. You knew his name before you arrested him. You knew his name before he even left town, from what I understand. So if you had some suspect like that and you had his name and you failed to do any investigative stuff, now I would understand if you were understaffed or unable, but even in your own words, you state to us that you make the impression that you're a highly capable police department because you surreptitiously obtained a cigarette butt from another suspect and had it tested.
Right.
I mean, so you're telling us how professional you are, yet you don't do any actual real investigative work with Koberger prior to charging him.
I mean, when you found his car, where you're the police officer that found his car in the parking lot in front of his house or the dorm, you don't take pictures of his tires. You don't take pictures of any of the outside, the door handles, any of that. I mean, you don't need a warrant.
Listen. How about if the police did an investigation? They said, Mr. Koberger, you've got a similar vehicle that we had caught on camera. Do you mind if we have a look at your car? Listen, this is what you're supposed to do as an investigative agency.
Well, you don't need a warrant for things that are publicly seen. So if you turn your body cam on and you're walking around the car, you're getting photos of valuable information at that point of reference.
You could open the doors. Do you mind if we look on the inside? Can you open the trunk, please? It's just standard routine. Believe me, you're not a suspect, sir, but a white elantra was seen, and somebody had said there was a white elantra here. We're doing this with so many elantras that we're sick of elantras. I mean, that's your job, bro. That's how you get evidence from people. And so you interviewed 100 other people. You got samples of their DNA. You did all of that, but Koberger wasn't in that pile of people. Come on. There's something wrong with that.
Well, Heather says, if you were looking for a 2011 to 13, why take pics of a 2015?
I agree.
I would say that, at this point, they were pretty certain that this was the damn vehicle. I mean, wasn't that police officer like almost pretty certain because he lined up the bushy eyebrows, the ID and all this stuff? Wasn't he pretty certain that this could have been the vehicle?
And then how shocked do you have to be that once you actually have this man in custody and you have now total control over his entire life, how shocked must you be to find that there's nothing to connect him to this crime as you alleged in that charging document? I don't know about you, but I think that is a massive, massive concern. I mean, that to me is like that. If there were ever a boom, that's a boom.
This whole case
has been disproven.
I mean, listening to that detective on the stand yesterday, I guess it was yesterday. I didn't listen to it all, but I listened to enough. He didn't sound like he was very confident on his notes or, the recollections.
Twizzle had a couple of points. You want to put him up here? I'd like to ask him a couple of questions, but I mean,
sure. Can you send him the link?
Present settings. I could just get it from up here. Can I put it in the regular chat room here?
Well, I'm kind of nervous of just putting it out there for anybody. You know what I mean?
Well, there's not that many people in here though. There's 11 people.
Yeah,
watching.
go ahead.
They're all regulars, I do it in my room too, and if see, it says I can't do that.
Okay, I'll do it.
Failed to post 12 gauge. Yeah. Sorry.
Twiz, I'm gonna invite you up, buddy.
No, I think, folks, that there was a lot of circumstantial evidence that gave them the ability to fall in the trap of tunnel vision. I think Brian Koberger was a fantastic suspect, at least on the original observation of the information, the collections that they had and the observations they made. I don't object to that kid being a suspect at all. It's everything that came after that became an issue for them. How they dealt with it, what they assumed. The information they had, they put those facts together to paint a picture, and that picture has been completely dissected by the defense. And you're a year away from trial. I don't think it's going to go that far. I just don't think it'll go.
Yo.
All right, I'm going to be quiet. Twiz, What was your assessment of that hearing there with that particular guy?
Oh man, it's crazy. I don't understand why he was arrested to begin with. I don't understand why he's still locked up. I don't know. There's a lot.
But no. You were in that hearing. You were in that courtroom, right?
Yes.
Okay. So can you give us your rundown of what you came out of that with? Just sticking to that.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying, but I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff because like they were preparing for the grand jury a month beforehand, which means that they didn't have evidence to keep him locked up if that pretrial hearing started back then, and they knew it. In my opinion, that's kind of speculation, but I don't know. I kind of need to like watch it again.
Well,
Do you believe that it was rushed? That you've been following this for a while, right? Do you believe
Yeah.
that what you've been watching and what we've been talking about up here, that possibly it was rushed to get a suspect in custody?
Oh, for sure. They needed to have somebody in custody before that semester started. Because
right,
like
well,
40% of the kids were not going to come back or something.
their actual enrollment went up, just so people know. In
Well,
spite of that, it was going up and it continued to climb even in spite of the arrest or lack thereof, just so you know.
yeah, but I mean, like after the attacks happened, like a bunch of kids went home for Thanksgiving that week and they didn't come back. Now, maybe they were going to do online schooling and they just weren't going to come back to the actual university.
Yeah, that I
That's
don't
very
have.
possible.
But they're still on the hook for their payment for that semester and all that. But let's
Yeah,
stick to
yeah.
what you saw in that courtroom. So this happened on the 19th. When was the grand jury convened? Do we know? Do we have that date?
It was May 18th or something like that, May 16th. I looked it up yesterday.
Okay. And so that does look like he ran that as quick as he could. But there was also a statement I was going to say that Golf and I both heard, and we can't find the video. Maybe Golf has it, where even Judge, when addressing the preliminary hearing, and the argument that they rushed it to the indictment, he said in court because something to the effect of because you didn't have a good case about avoiding that preliminary hearing. Yeah.
Yeah,
in an old hearing.
He said that. Golf inspector knows exactly what he said.
Yeah, I probably missed that one, but that's wouldn't surprise me. I mean, at the hearing before yesterday, he said if it goes to trial.
Yes, and I keep saying I don't believe this is going to make it to trial.
I don't think it will either. But he said a couple of interesting things in that hearing because
like what?
He said if it goes to trial, and then he said that he was aware of a lot of issues with this case.
Yeah, he's not the first time he said that, either one of those things.
Yeah, and then yesterday.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. Do
you believe that at this point, in any other murder case, the trial would have already been going on at this point? There wouldn't have been all these motions to compel and all this.
I think a murder case, you're going to have a good couple of years before it actually goes to trial.
Yeah, I've never really followed cases like when they're going on, so I can't really answer that. But what I do know from what other people have said is at least for capital cases where they're threatening the death penalty, like on average it takes like 5 years to go to trial. So this is actually like moving along fairly fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can move at different speeds and paces. It's the complexity of each case. And this case is for whatever beyond the idea of complex. You would think that these people were actually inventing a new life form. Okay.
Yeah.
And they were doing it from a chemistry set they had in 6th grade, and they're working diligently to make it come true because it's just a chaotic mess. The entire situation.
I mean, the motion to suppress are next, so that's going to be a hell of a shit show, I think.
I can only imagine what's going to happen. But I think she's making the argument, and this is where I think Bill. I don't know his level of intelligence. Just because someone's had a job for a long time, don't mean they're smart. Anyway.
Nope.
She is actually performing a preliminary hearing through motion.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just look at what she's doing. Look at what she's saying. Look at how she's presenting. And she,
That's what it feels like. Yes, you're right.
well, that she's made that statement. She said, even though he did not get a preliminary hearing, it doesn't mean we can't argue what we would argue in a preliminary hearing.
Right.
Right.
No, these last couple of hearings have been pretty mind blowing.
Did that cop seem confused? Did you understand what he was saying? And did it seem to you to be suspect, or did it just seem to be, like we're having a conversation together here?
I don't know. I don't think he wanted to be there because he kind of had to admit that he screwed up on a couple of things. Like there's that one moment later on in the hearing where she asked him a question and he mouths the word no, but in the courtroom I didn't hear anything. And I was like, what the hell just happened? And then Ann just stood there for a few seconds and then asked him again, and then he had to say it out loud, but his voice was kind of shaky. Like he did not want to say no.
So, what's the general aura in the courtroom? Is it would you say tension in the air, or would you
Not
say
yesterday. Yesterday was super calm.
Okay.
It was almost kind of weird that it was
And
calm. I've only gone to two. I went to the hearing before this one and then yesterday.
Okay.
And like the first hearing, it didn't really feel tense in the courtroom, but you could tell there was tension between Ann and the prosecution. But yesterday was super calm.
She's also very in question about the police people that performed the investigation. She's been a suspect of that from the very beginning, her very first statements when it came to the people that were involved in this case, be it the policemen or lab workers, correct? College, what do they do? How long have they been trained? She went after that immediately. And now this was the first exposure I think we've seen as an investigator part of the case on a stand. And you're right. He was very, very worried about that word no. And what I gathered was you're not entitled to grand jury information, right?
Right.
But if you're telling me that you put together this product that was presented to the grand jury and you didn't save your work, then I'm going to say I'm entitled to whatever the grand jury saw. Do you understand? And she's been trying to make this argument and fight for the grand jury information because grand jury information is sacrosanct. You cannot see it. But, okay, if your work product isn't available for me to see, then we got an issue because your work product would tell me what you showed the grand jury without showing me what you showed the grand jury. I'm entitled to know your work product. You follow me?
I think that's how it should be.
And that's what this guy didn't want to say no to, that he didn't know I didn't save my work.
Yeah, they just screenshotted it.
But he said, well, we could always put it back in and reproduce it. No. That's not what you sent to the grand jury. To redo what you're saying you can redo to provide me with information is not equal to what you did the first time. That's what her argument is. In other words, you know what I'm saying? It's trust but verify. Where's the work? That should have accompanied and been saved so that there would be no request to get anything from a grand jury. I shouldn't be asking them. What you presented to your case against my client should be available to me, if not in direct evidence, then in at least the work you did to get that evidence. You follow me?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That's the problem that cop gave them yesterday. That's the problem he left on the table for the prosecution.
I didn't understand I didn't understand that either, Sarge. Whenever you were asked about the evidence that you collected, and how you collected it and how you got to it, and what specific dates and how long it took you to turn this over and things of that nature, and you say that you didn't save your work.
Yes.
Where did it go?
See what Heather's saying? I could screenshot some proof anyone did anything. Screenshots is totally unacceptable. She asked when he got involved, and then he wasn't the main investigator, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right, Twizzle?
That's what he said.
So again, you have now you're having chain of custody issues, chain of command. What's going on here? That's why in the very, very, very beginning, if people remember Ann Taylor demanding a list of officers, she didn't want to interview the entire department, but the officers involved in this case and the lab workers and anybody connected to the DNA.
It's almost like.
Do you remember that back in the beginning? Do you remember that, 12 gauge?
Yes, it's almost like MPD was the foot soldiers and the FBI and the Idaho State Police were the ones actually doing the investigating.
Well, somebody said something, and I'm going to be extremely polite in reply. They said When you have a personal experience, your judgment is clouded. And let me just say that my personal experience with the law, which is sadly, okay, extensive enough to know that every time I defended myself, I won. And in several of those cases, I committed the crime. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just be clear to the person that made that statement. I'm not that clouded when it comes to seeing shit that's pretty common sense. Right. So when I look at what's going on with Koberger, that's what attracted me. That that probable cause affidavit is flawed in huge ways. And now we're seeing the defense expose all of those flaws. I'm not saying Koberger didn't do it. And I'm certainly not saying Koberger did it. I'm just pointing out to you what I see and I said this in the very beginning, and everything Ann Taylor is doing and has done, I said all along these were the things she was going to do. And there's no clouding of my judgment. It's just I have a little more understanding because I actually did litigate cases for myself. I did the law library work. I did have a professional lawyer write the motion, but that's where I come from, understanding of how the criminal law works. And they really went the rails.
Hey, Sarge, Rondi says, with Ellie guy on stand, could that be considered tampering with evidence?
No. I don't know. No. He was assigned to be part of the case, so he becomes part of the official chain of custody, chain of command.
I believe that there were other people actually doing more thorough investigating, and these guys were just kind of looking over it and signing off. Okay, this looks legit. You know what I mean? Like superior type officers versus the ones on the ground actually gathering and doing investigating.
Right. Yeah, and here's the other thing too is if something would be presented somehow by the prosecution more than criminals are known to turn off their phone before committing a crime, more than some supposition of a theory, the solid fact that places Koberger at that crime, I would accept that in a heartbeat. I wouldn't question it. Okay, but my concern would then become, is that even going to be usable in a court of law because of the way they went about getting it? If all of their accusations to get this guy arrested and charged with this crime are not real, why was he arrested? You follow that point?
Yes, exactly. And how have they maintained the ability to keep him?
That's like me charging you with vehicular homicide when you were sitting home on your couch watching fucking CSI at the time of the accident. Okay? And I arrest and charge you with that before I do any investigation into that. That's exactly what basically happened here. And that's the issue that Ann Taylor's addressing, Leon, whatever your name is. Well, this isn't about whether the guy's guilty or innocent. This is about the process. And
let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's look at the other side of the coin, Sarge. Let's say that, the information, the evidence, and everything that we're seeing at this point doesn't make sense due to the fact that that's all we see. And the stuff that is under the gag order and sealed and everything else gets presented in the courtroom. Will that change your mind if you start to see a pattern of something different being shown that points toward every piece of the puzzle that we haven't seen up to that point? Will you change your mentality as far as, well, this makes a lot more sense, or now I see why I didn't believe this could have happened?
I get what you're asking me. And let me just explain that the answer to that, the simple answer is yes. But the more fruitful answer is he's already admitted the kid wasn't stalking. Not Ann, Bill. Not Bill, the judge. Okay.
Okay.
So so that accusation or that suggestion in the PCA is garbage. That also eliminates, obviously, now these 12 trips that you used to assess that he was a stalker planning a murder is useless. It's not true. Fair enough?
Well, let's go back to the wording, okay? Because you're a smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
The PCA starts off with the word probable. There's more of a probability by a judge signing this document stating that this evidence that we put on this piece of paper is more probable that this individual did it than didn't do it. So what we've done with that PCA is we've torn it apart to the point where we've tried to take the probable cause out of it. And we want to show, hear me out. I'm playing devil's advocate right now. So if you're looking at probable cause based on what the police at the scene saw, heard, just like I said, what, when, where, and how, that was all in the PCA. That was enough for the judge to sign off to arrest him.
Okay.
That's all that was.
Okay.
So
and
at
it's
that
all been, now let's go back to where I left off.
Okay.
It's been disproven. And even in their own accusation, they can't account for the 2 hours the phone didn't report. So they can't tell you where Koberger is at all. They just can't. They admit that in that statement, right? Then the other information that they added to give you the idea this guy could reasonably be the killer, that has all been discredited. You can't connect him to these girls in any way, electronically or through driving and traffic and any way, right? That's gone. So there's a real problem in what now, knowing that information is false. Why is this man still in jail? Why is he under arrest? They've proven it to be false. It's not like it's.
But there's other probable cause in there that's being able to.
What's left though? What made it probable? If you take away all of the accusations, right? What's left in the PCA?
The trace evidence
of what?
Of the pings. I mean, the pings were not saying he was stalking. That was evidence to put the individual in the vicinity 12 other times. That never. I mean, if I recall correctly, I could be wrong. Those pings were not saying that he was stalking them 12 other times. I believe that's where the media got involved and was saying.
No, it's in the PCA. It doesn't say that was the means of stalking, but they said that because of this behavior, okay, it showed signs of stalking. So it was part of their consideration.
So if they see your phone pinging around,
it wasn't just.
What's your favorite burger place?
Doesn't matter. Just name anyone.
Burger King. Let's say you're in the vicinity of Burger King 12 times because you love hamburgers.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you're stalking a worker that works there, or are you doing it to get some kind of need met? And I know that's
not the correct context.
I understand that. But the point is there any other reason? He is in college. Is there any other reason he could have been in the vicinity? Could he have been tutoring a student? Could he have been looking up information at that college? Or, could he have just been driving around in a different damn town?
Listen, I'm sorry, but I'm the way I see this is probable cause is never out of my consideration. As a matter of fact, it's completely and only based on probable cause that I look at what I'm looking at. And when you tell me that you're familiar, that your experience tells you criminals turn off phones before a crime, doesn't tell me that Brian Koberger was at 1122 Queen Road. It doesn't even come close. It's so far away that it's like trying to turn your computer desk into an airplane. It's just that wildly different, right? So the reality doesn't exist. You can't place him there. You've established that for me. That's gone out the window in your own words, right from jump. Then you go on to explain these 12 trips that suggest possibly that this gentleman was in that area for the purpose of surveilling these young women, right? You're making that suggestion. And look at everything in there. I agree 100%. If you take just that information, I, as a judge, may have signed off on that probable cause arrest. Fair?
I mean, the Payne writing the PCA sounded like he was more of a criminal-minded person than what the actual
I would have asked. I may have a judge asked them to go back and get me one solid piece, but you got a circumstantial argument in that PCA that this guy is the killer. So, okay, you can run with that. I don't know if I was a judge in authority and I read that PCA, my first instinct was when I read it, there's no evidence placing him at that scene of that crime. None. So I, as a judge, would have asked for something a little more solid. Bring in more paperwork, do the cast work, get more accurate, get a swab of this guy. I would have asked for personally. That's my opinion if I were a judge. And
wasn't there a route shown in the PCA of the potential route that he took?
Yes. This guy laid out some route. and it goes way down south. It even kind of includes the area of the park. If you look at the route, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Right.
Supposedly after the crimes, he traveled south. So could it have been possible that he traveled to that park after the crime?
It's possible. Sure. Anything
Give
is
himself
possible.
an alibi there?
But it would have been so far after the crime that he got to that park. Remember, that was a 40-minute drive
Right.
to get to that park. And they picked him up
But
28
you,
minutes after the
I've
crime.
been listening to you for a while now, not just tonight, but on other panels. And you made another point. In one of the panels, you said, okay, the crime ended at this time. His phone didn't turn on until 48 minutes afterwards,
28.
or 28 minutes. So theoretically, 18 minutes, where did those 18 minutes go, or something of that nature? You were trying to make it appear that, there was such a time difference there. What happened in
Right.
that time?
The travel time to where they picked him up from the crime scene was 11 minutes.
Right.
And they picked him up 28 minutes after the crime scene at that location. So you have to account now for the other 17 minutes. What did he do? Why is he caught on camera? Why is there no, you follow me? You have to now fill in those holes. And I don't think they can, because they said that he first came back onto this, you know what I'm saying? So there's apparently no information for the 17 minutes between the ending of the crime at 4:25 and his phone reporting at 4:48, okay, or 4:47. So
4:47, 48.
So there's no accounting of why do you have an 11-minute trip taking 28 minutes? How did, or you know what I mean? The amount of time over that it would take to get to where he was if he did the crime doesn't fit. It's too big. It's too big of a gap. That he would have had to have stopped somewhere or parked, or you've got, I mean, you can argue he did that to clean his car, I guess. But again, his phone didn't report to the network, and the next time it did, it was a distance away from that house.
Yeah.
Right.
And also he's a creature of habit, it looks like. It looks like he's very methodical in his thinking, like it's a way of safety. You were talking about drug addicts earlier, and this brought to my mindset. They're creatures of habit. So if you're used to committing certain things at certain hours, you're gonna, especially if your vision is not that great, you're gonna do things that you've done many times. So it's mostly muscle memory rather than thinking about it.
I'm a big car guy, and when I got off my stream, every night after my stream, I go out and I got a high performance car I built, and I go out every night in that car when the weather's, we got good weather, and I travel in the very exact same areas. Okay, what Brian Koberger's doing isn't unusual, at least to me. It's not. Maybe because I'm on the spectrum, I'm doing something others don't, but I don't think that's true because I see a lot of other cars out there. And you generally do find a comfortable area to drive, right? Yeah. You don't want to be caught in traffic, So, I got these routes that I take in these areas I go to, and it's not unusual at all. And I'll do it when we're done here. I don't care if it's midnight when I leave. The only issue I have is my car is extremely loud, but I don't really annoy my neighbors, but this time of the year, so they got dogs that bark. I got a loud car. I figure it's all comes out the wash. But yeah, I just find the circumstances surrounding the case is that even if Koberger did it, it certainly looks like the state has screwed this up.
Yeah, I mean, I can stand behind that. If he did do it, he might get off on technicality based on the inept ability for certain things to be backed up or to be able to be proven by factual information. I mean, the cast report, they still don't have the cast report. Things that the defense have asked for, they have not been able to hand those over. And you have to ask, though, what is the purpose of that? What is the reason behind that? If you're so certain that that you had that evidence to the grand jury, or maybe you didn't even present that evidence, but you have had to have that evidence throughout the time, where is it?
Well, and I own a company, and we use paperwork, and I handle all the paperwork. Okay, and there's always a copy of my work, along with the customer's copy. There's all. In other words, I don't understand how you could perform a task and not have an end product that was saved. So that's very suspicious. What happened with that? Not I don't know. To me, it just seems like a very suspicious explanation is to tell me why you didn't save anything. It's just very weird.
Even the FBI didn't save their stuff either because it was a tip.
Right, but and also, I mean, you're a trained investigator, you have to know that any work you put in towards a case that's accusing a citizen of a crime, that work has to be saved. I mean, you got notepads, you got tape recorders, you got dispatches that send you to go interview a witness, and you record that, you write notes, you have proof that you did that. Right?
Well, in my line of work, I have to. I've always been told in trainings and everything else, if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. You know,
I
if
would
it's
I
not
would
on
do it.
paper, it didn't happen.
Right, and so he didn't even bring it with him to court. A completed.
No.
What did he do? What is he going to bring a screenshot and he's going to start doing it all over again?
Well, he emailed it to Ann the night before the hearing, right?
Right, I know. He just put it together, and she's been asking for this discovery for how long?
Yeah, a long time. I mean, if anything, if the guy's guilty or if he's not, the ineptness of maybe procedure is going to get him off. Because it seems like she's playing a lot on that avenue. She's trying to dispel the fact that they don't have their work in order. And I've read in so many
their work doesn't. There isn't any fact that support their work. There isn't a single fact that supports the work that they, and the work I'm talking about. The statements in the PCA are unsupportable by any fact. That is a problem. Fair.
Well, I mean, you could get a case thrown out based on the wording, or there's some cases you misspell words or whatever. That's enough to throw the case out. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen in this one, but just the fact that you don't have certain things, how can you prove that was evidence at the time of the arrest? How can you prove that was evidence at the time you wrote this search warrant?
It all ends on that transfer DNA. The whole case, and that's the other thing I said in the beginning. If an American citizen could be convicted on one source, one location of transfer DNA, we're doomed. Now, I would have no objection, none, if multiple trace DNAs of Brian Koberger were found at that scene. I would not question even that it was trace DNA, because almost every single DNA case that's been overturned that used transfer DNA, almost every single case to the last, is because there were other trace DNA samples at the crime scene that were never tested or verified, and they were in locations that would also be consistent with rape and murder. Okay, and the convicted person couldn't remain convicted. How do you know these other people didn't do it? You see,
right?
This is what the problem with trace DNA is. You can't establish a timeline for it. You can't establish that it was even placed or even obtained its presence on that sheath. It could have done it when the police were moving it. You don't know. That to me, if that's your whole case, and this guy can be convicted and executed, that standard of proof being transfer DNA should terrify everybody. One source of transfer DNA. Wow.
One thing I want to say before I forget. I want to say this before I forget. Usually whenever situations like this happen, like there's murders of this multitude and whatever, there's always a copycat. Almost always a copycat. Have we heard of anything since then that would give us any understanding that there might have been somebody copying this murder?
I don't know. Have you heard anything?
I haven't.
No, I know the case in Oregon or somewhere close by is similar time.
They're similar. They're similar, but
right. There's a distance between them, and so we're unclear even for the motive of that attack, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
You know, I also
they
want to
did
say
leave. They did leave witnesses. They did. There was a dog in the place.
I want to
Around
ask you a question.
the
Let me ask you a question. I want to be the devil's advocate.
Okay.
What in your mind do you think is in their possession or could be in their possession that would show he did this?
Mm, I would say possibly camera image, maybe a facial recognition.
Camera
Um,
image from where?
I I wish I could tell you. I mean,
In the house, at the house?
it would
I
be any of the cameras in the vicinity of the house. It would have to be somewhere in the vicinity to be able to place him close enough, as you stated a while ago, to even point that, if there's a camera image of him dressed all in black, a camera image of him getting back into the vehicle, or facial recognition or something of that sort.
something
I
that
mean,
shows you it's Brian Kohlberger in the immediate vicinity of that scene.
yeah.
Okay. And is it fair to say, and you tell me what you think about this,
Okay.
that accusations based on what's come out since have discredited the accusations? Do you see that or do you not?
Yeah, I do. I do.
So would you agree with this? That the description of the PCA is inaccurate, but that does not mean he did not commit the crime.
True.
Okay.
I mean, if there's other evidence that they're able to put together that can show a consistent pattern that leads to the man without reasonable doubt, then. But we're not
What?
prevalent. We're not prevalent to any of that information that they might have still.
Okay, so let me ask you this now. This is the boom questions. They're just a couple of short ones. Okay. So if evidence is presented that shows that, do you think the argument that the PCA was invalid in its allegations to arrest him would interfere with the use of that evidence possibly?
The only way
Would that
the
evidence be
only
found
way,
from the poisonous
based on what I've learned so far in my classes, is the evidence that they gathered. If they gathered it maliciously or without warrant, or if it was gathered illegally, that's the only way that the evidence would not be presentable in court. And that's
So,
the scary part, is that whenever you're asking these people to gather this evidence and they don't have the transparency to show you,
right.
that's very suspicious.
Well, it's something that we shouldn't as Americans accept. But let me just ask this question again. So if I was going to say I talked to 12 Gauge and I agree that the PCA is baseless in its accusations that led to his arrest, would I be misrepresenting you or would I be on the right page?
Well, based on the question that you asked me, I would say you would be on target, but
Yeah.
I still have to
Yeah.
see the rest of the evidence presented before I really make my mind up.
And do you think that it's possible or that it's that if you were arrested with accusations, okay, that portrayed your behavior that were untrue, and then that accusation was used to get warrants to arrest and then search and dig into you, right? That
Right.
then netted evidence to prove you committed the crime. Do you think that evidence then is fruit from the poisonous tree?
Yes.
Remember, the
Yes.
arrest was based on evidence that could not be verified.
Yes. I
wasn't
learned
no
about that this past week. You're right on point.
And that's the catch-22 I pointed out a long time ago, and I got the attention of Detective John. When I said it's a lesson that I think Americans might be able to learn from this, is that the process is the most important part of everything in this country. That's why we have America. Okay. That's why there's a constitution and a justice system. And when the people that you have working for you, which are district attorneys and policemen, they work for you. When those people aren't doing their job up to par to put a murderer in prison, maybe we should start doing things together and our voice should be heard as one. Because If that happens in this case, that's the worst possible freaking thing you could even imagine. If he
Yeah.
did it, and these policemen and this prosecutor messed up all the legwork.
Yeah. I spoke to Detective John today. He told me to tell everybody hello, and he will be back soon.
I didn't know you talked to Detective John.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the one that had me on his panel. That's how I even started all of this.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
All this
Well, when you
live.
talk to him, tell him I want to bring him on your Ass Hurts News Network.
All right. All right. I will tell him that.
All right.
I told him things have changed since he's been gone. You know, things have changed. But he said he will be back eventually, and he's looking forward to coming back. So I do. I mean, based on how you just explained that, I think you and I have been saying the same thing for a very long time in different wording, and I think most people do misconstrue our wordings as guilt or innocence, but that's not what we're saying. We're
No.
saying that the process, if malice in any way or intent, that we are all in danger as human beings. You know,
And I want to say that if people in the audience notice, we stick only with the available facts and take them at face value. That doesn't mean they're immutable, like they're going to be there until the sun expires. That's not what we think. It's not what I think.
No,
What I do though when I look at a situation is the confirmable information that's provided, I accept at face value, and I come to an understanding of it. I'm totally open to being contradictive data to be added to it. Because to me, that's the only way to. It's like putting a puzzle together. You start at one corner and work your way out, right?
Right.
And if you don't have the box and you don't know what the picture is, you can guess as you work through this puzzle. But pretty much the puzzle has to be almost done for you to know exactly what's in that image, right? And that's how I assemble information on politics when I do that, or when I do criminal.
I'm the same way. And I believe that I think that by supplying people with research and analytical coping mechanisms in order for them to make up their own mind, it teaches individuals that change is possible in the mindset. That you could see him guilty today, you could see him innocent tomorrow. I mean, it isn't until the final trial that we're actually all of us are going to be able to be analytical enough to say, was the evidence real? Was it incompetent police work? Was it incompetent lab technicians? Did they get it right in this aspect? You're still going to have questions. You may never get the answers to your questions, and that's what's tragic a lot of times out of these cases.
Yeah.
The guy could be guilty, he could be sentenced to death, he could get killed, and he goes to his grave only knowing whether he was guilty or whether he was innocent.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
There's a lot of tragedy within tragedy, unfortunately, and some of the tragedy is unneeded tragedy where I think my points of view are reasonable and they're staying within the bounds of the data that we were given. And I'm not what if, or he could have done it, he should have, he might have. I don't do any of that. I don't want to talk about what the Banfield boys did or didn't do, or the frat. I have no data to connect them to the crime other than someone else's interpretation of what they saw in a video. That is not data that I would accept as being used to come up with some idea of what happened here. And that's the pitfall. That's the rabbit hole that so many people drop down into, whether it's true crime or even politics. This woulda, coulda, shoulda. They got these other, right? Like, and I'm not picking on anybody, but when someone says, well, he could have made a U-turn. Well, there's no basis to make that argument.
Right.
That's that, right? And so
Well,
I think that you do it too. You stay right with the data that we have, and that's it.
Well, I mean that makes the most logical sense to me. And I mean that's how I've done it all my life, is I need both sides of the coin in order to make a decision. I can't just be told one side and make the decision blindly. I have to visualize it, see it, break it down, all that. So
Well, even someone had mentioned corruption. Corruption to me is not a cop stealing something or helping a drug dealer or doing something overt like that. That to me is not corruption. And I actually agree with the mantra of Black Lives Matter when they say corruption is endemic to the system. And the corruption that's endemic to the system is when another officer makes a mistake, they don't address that mistake based on the validity of doing the right thing. If that mistake would interfere with what the goal is to prosecute, then that mistake will get ignored, right? Or if you're in an area where you're being constantly pulling over people because of their color, and you're in cars, you're being trained to do this. This is endemic in the system. That's the corruption that needs to be rooted out. The obvious, this guy works for a drug dealer or he's shipping drugs in his right. Those are obvious signs of corruption, or they lie under oath to convict you. Those are obvious, but they all only became what they were or are because of the endemic corruption. These little things. You're not supposed to speed when you're a policeman. You're not supposed to jaywalk. And the funny thing is, we the people, if we held police accountable to those standards, right? They should be the example of the law, not just the enforcer of it. And that's what's missing from our police forces. They're not the example of the law. It says 35, they go by at 60. If you do that, you get a ticket. That's wrong. That's endemic corruption. You see?
Well, wouldn't it be easier to, if you were going to look for a perfect suspect to really, I hate the word pin on it, pin the crime to, but for the lack of a better word,
I don't think that's what happened here.
Well, I know there's too much that goes into that, but what I'm saying is it'd be easier to keep a lot of the individuals past out of the limelight if it was somebody that wasn't a local. Like if it was a local, then it'd be hard to not bring everything about their lives into the investigation. With somebody that's not from there, all you really have been told about Brian, criminology student, bullied, this, that, and the other. All you have been told is the very basics, but you haven't been shown the good sides of him, other than in the very beginning, they said he was a security guard, saved a lady's life, this and that and the other. That's about the only good thing I've ever heard stated about this.
No, well, he put cameras in someone's house that thought their house was getting broken into.
Oh yeah, that
the
too.
allegation came out that he was watching her, but there's no proof. There's no police report. The woman, who's the woman? Did that woman come forward publicly and make these statements?
Right.
I don't think so. I don't think she did.
I don't think so either. Like she was the only Asian in that area that he befriended. Like I was telling Jeff that one day on our panel is, she was obviously the only Asian in that place because she's the only Asian that they collaborate him with in any of that area.
Is that who he put the cameras in her apartment?
Yeah. Okay. And she was the one that he was supposedly seen at Walmart.
Well, they would have had his laptops. Listen, they would have had all of his data, his laptops, his computer, his phones. And if he was sneaking in and watching her on that camera, there would be some record of that.
Of course.
Okay. They have access to everything Koberger ever had from the moment he was conceived. Okay, forward.
Like Ann said in that one motion hearing, I have to go back 3 decades or 3 generations. So they've done some extensive work on it.
You're right. If they did the IGG, they went even further on this guy.
Yeah, right? This guy, this is the most known man on the planet right now. If anybody, he knows every freaking thought he's ever had.
And the crazy thing here is if the prosecution keeps traveling down the road it's traveling, they're going to have Pope John Paul in the house with a camera, a Polaroid or a Kodak camera, an Instamatic. They're going to have a level of evidence so strong against this guy that nobody could dispute it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And everything that they've alleged and they've let the media run with, and they helped build this narrative that this guy stalked him, this guy was this guy did this guy did that. I say all of that stuff was great as a suspect, but to then turn it into this guy did this, and this PCA was the best written document. How many lawyers said that? And I can't stop the best written PCA I've ever heard. most in depth. What are you talking about? There isn't one single piece of evidence in the damn thing. So, yeah, this case has been a conundrum the whole time.
Well, I want to respond to this statement that Leon made right here. There's relatives that don't want association with Brian. It's fair. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my life. I've shared openly on here. I'm a recovering drug addict, alcoholic as well, and I have individuals in my past that no matter the accolade that I've accomplished since that time period in my life, they still view me as that person, no matter what I've accomplished.
Right.
Past those moments of pain and everything that I did to them, they will never see me in a positive light because they will not be able to let go of the fact that they could have loved somebody so deeply that could have hurt them so deeply. And that is only speaking of my own regard. So I can only imagine where his family and their, the extended family, how they have feelings of betrayal by Brian at those points where he was addicted.
Right. I mean, even just being accused, that puts the whole family in it, and no matter what. I mean, it's not just him whether he did it or not. Everybody that's associated with this guy, knowingly, especially a relative. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Your life. These girls lost their jobs or they had to quit or something, right? Didn't the sisters?
Yeah. It got so bad. Yeah, it got so bad.
So you're what a calamity, man. And if you do have the wrong person, it's just no amount of money is going to fix that.
No, I mean it's sad because I've reached out to these people that in the steps they talk about amends and things of that nature. I've tried to make amends to these people, but I had one straight up tell me, "Well, how can I believe that? You've lied to me before. You've hurt me with this and you've hurt me with that." And I was like, "Well, you got a good point there. I was that type of person, but it's just between me and my creator now. I can only reach out. I wish you the best, and I haven't spoken to him since because I don't want to bring any more pain or any more ammunition for them to continue to paint a negative picture of me, even though I've moved on from that portion of my life." Yeah.
Yeah, you live your life and your life will speak for itself. Your living conditions, the way you carry yourself, the things you're doing, that'll all be different than what it was when you harmed that person. And if they're a relative or anywhere in view of what's going on in your life, even momentarily every now and then, they'll see that you're a changed person. I mean, that's the catch-22 when you do go back to make amends is I never expected anyone to forgive me at all, but that's they're entitled to that because I wronged them. I have no expectation of what they should or shouldn't do. That helped me see through it. And the same thing applies in these cases when I look at like the Sebastian Rogers case. I don't look at the parents as perpetrators only because I was told that they are not only cooperating, but that they're not. Right? I think the police had made that statement. The parents aren't suspects, they're fully cooperating. So I don't want to know anything about their backgrounds or them personally. I want to see what we can do to help find Sebastian. Right? So if the parents aren't involved, were you on that stream or in that room the other night where I said, are they looking at the school teachers or people within his immediate circle?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, because the internet's only paying attention to the parents and they just want to tear the parents apart, right? As being bad people. And they may, in fact, be bad people. But what's that got to do with the kid missing? How did he go missing? Where is he? More importantly, the only way you'll know how he went missing is if you find him, right? Well, find out how. He's the only one that knows, as far as we can tell. So, yeah, and I kind of try to look at life like that. When my expectations of others, I have none whatsoever. People are going to do what they're going to do.
I'm the same way, Sarge. I'm the same way. And I believe that's why we can get on here. We can have a sensible conversation and bounce off each other because, when you have that understanding, when you've been through hell and you've made it out of it,
right?
How could you ever want to present that kind of image in the face of other people that are hurting? Right. It's like that's one of the reasons that attracted me to this case. Not only the atrocity of the 4 individuals that were murdered, but the fact that Brian was a former addict. And that got me to thinking about criminal behavior and thought patterns and everything that I do on a daily. Right. And it intrigued me to find out more. And it kind of saddened me that there's not more information about that point, and it's like,
Listen, I know that there's a lot of murders associated with addiction. Okay,
yeah,
but they're murders based solely on getting what you want for your, you want your drug. I mean, it's an obvious reason why that murder took place. Fair enough, right? Or you didn't pay for your
yeah,
drugs, or you stole your drugs, or right,
right,
and
yeah,
some calamitous shooting takes place, or you're part of a gang. All those things we can understand. When you look at a case that happened in Idaho, it's so difficult to understand how what happened in such a limited time frame, and how the events and the stories that we've been given and the data that we've been given, and it's a cluster F, right? You
right.
got Dylan, you got all these stories from Dylan, you got the cop stories, you got this, you got Ann now showing you this isn't true, that isn't true. And it's such a chaotic mess that one has to ask themselves, what the hell's going on in this country?
Well, do you think
in all
people?
fairness, if they don't have that smoking gun, isn't it fair to say that it's up to the government to let the guy go,
Yeah,
admit they're wrong, and move on? I mean,
I mean,
isn't
could
that
it
what
not be
justice is?
fair that could it not be fair also that due to our technological advancement and the fear of cameras and things of that nature, crimes have gotten faster to commit because the level of being caught is so limited based on these other technological advancements. Would that not be fair?
I think
Like
that your
this,
ability to get caught now is significantly higher than it was.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like they say there's no way this crime could have happened that fast. Well, I've shown videos where, 5
Right.
strikes per second. And I don't think people believed that in the beginning. I think that they looked
See,
at it as it was more of a fight, but there possibly was not.
well, the one woman had, according to the father, there's no one given a specific number, so I don't even want to say, but a
Right.
significant amount of wounds from fighting back, whatever that means. But obviously, it wasn't just quick 5 stabs, right? I also find it difficult to believe that you did this in pairs, and that you did this as an individual, and you did this spur of the moment, and you were able to move through that house that has some peculiarities to it, okay? And
Hmm.
move through that house and commit it in 2 separate locations, completely on the other side of the house from each other, with 2 pairs of people, and two. That's an awful lot to digest in that short period of time. Happening that way, it to me, I've always struggled with that, because that's an awful lot of work to happen. And
Yeah.
so I think it's been narrowed down to about 9 minutes, and that includes getting out of the house, getting in that car, and leaving.
Well,
That to me.
I can tell you one thing. He was obviously in some physical shape, and he had some stamina about him. But was he capable of having the stamina enough to do that amount of work without, almost exhausting himself to the point of almost falling out on the way? Because they have him committing the crime and then having enough energy to take off all that heavy clothing, the boots, and this and that and the other, putting
If he
on
did
some
it right.
clothing. Right, if he did it. But what I'm saying is, it's almost superhuman, man. I mean, you notice how firemen
These
they
guys
have
try
to.
to give you, there's one of those, might be Gray Hughes or somebody like him, that showed, oh, look how quick I can get in and out of the suit. But dude, you just didn't commit 4 horrific homicides.
Right,
Look, I don't know if you guys have ever done anything criminal, but let me tell you about your adrenaline and how fast your heart starts beating.
right,
It's not like sitting here talking to you on the computer when I was committing crimes. You're a completely different zone. And now you're talking about, I can't even imagine the experience that was for one person to go through and do all of that, and then maintain to do everything perfectly sensible to get out. To me, you'd have to be a contract killer with serious military training in the Berets, or
right.
special forces. That level of intensity in that short amount of time, and to leave nothing behind except what they claim to be trace DNA on a button snap, is insane, bro. This guy
You
has to
know,
be
I,
the ninja from the cartoons. Who's that guy?
I,
Who's that guy that
um,
made all those Batman and Superman guys?
I incorporate this to a fireman. Like, when the fireman's in the firehouse, he's dressed casual, right? The fire alarm goes off. He jumps into his fire suit, puts on all that gear, has to run up flights of stairs and this and that and the other, carry that heavy ass hose, and then have to strip all that down. I mean, those guys are in hell of a physical shape.
Right.
Have you ever seen a real fat fireman? I'm sure they
No.
I'm sure they exist, but they're usually chiefs, you know?
So, I get it. I don't know if Leon's just trolling or if it's one thing to believe in information. It's another, but that prevents you from examining it. Remember when we talked about that? If you believe in data, then you're unable to examine it with any kind of fairness. And it's funny that there's the entire world is almost controlled by that. The belief in data, rather than just taking data as just something like a puzzle that you put it together and you move on to the next puzzle. I mean, that's all data is supposed to be. Now you may go back and refer to that puzzle, right? So a lug wrench takes off a tire. You may use that data later, but the fact is that's how it works, right? But people somehow they get into this belief of stuff, like they think going to a car and turning the key is an act of faith, and it just isn't. It's not an act of faith, it's an act of habit. You expect it to start because it has every last time you got into it. There's no faith in that at all. And you shouldn't believe the car is going to start. Your experience is there's no believing in it at all. The fact of the matter is you've experienced that it starts, and that's all that is. There's that to ingest belief or faith into that situation is just tomfoolery at best.
Well, we all get a sense of adrenaline rush when we're on these panels, when we're in a chat room, when we're chatting. I mean, that's a sense of adrenaline. You know, endorphins are released because a lot of people feel better about themselves when they're in a chat room, or they're able to give insight that other people don't have, or things of that nature. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
It just, we have to remember that this was an actual crime, and it was a very grisly, bloody crime, and hopefully one day we'll figure it all out.
Well, hopefully they'll come to some conclusion and get us to resolution, especially for the parents, because, man, I don't even know how the families hold it together with all of this chaos.
I don't either.
I don't even know how you would deal with it. I think I would have to distance myself from it. I would, you know what I mean? I wonder if in fact there's got to be some family members that are like that too, that are just like, I don't want to know nothing about nothing.
Yeah, they don't. They probably don't get on social media. They don't tell me about anything. Don't, just tell me when the court date is, or this, that, and the other, and I'll show up. I'll listen or whatever, but don't tell me anything.
Here's the last thing I want to say before I jump off here is it's funny to me that, and maybe I'm going to have to start working on that Gigolo case. That case to me somehow is ignored, and yet I think that there's a tremendous amount of information in that case, especially the fact that man stayed killing for 10 years because of police corruption. I'm just shocked that there isn't any big. I mean, that should be a documentary, for God's sakes.
I'd like to work that case with you, Sarge. Well, we open it up with the one about the chiropractor that got murdered not far from Moscow.
Right. And then they accused another chiropractor, right?
Yeah, I'd like to, maybe if you could present that one night on your panel, I'll jump up there and we can talk about that.
All right,
or vice versa, whichever.
What do you think of the Gigolo case, though? What do you think of the Gigolo?
The
There were
Gigolo
like 13 women killed there or something. Some crazy amount of women were killed, man.
I haven't really. I mean, I've studied the case just based on the very limited case study, tying it to other things. But as far as the case itself, I'd have to do some research on it to get back to you on that, because I don't know enough about the comment.
I think we should research that case and stream on that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because we're both analytical enough, and I think that case would be another great case, and just how off the rails our justice system is going.
That'd be
I don't
great.
care what these girls did for a living. These girls shouldn't have been murdered like that. And 10 years of continuing killing because you got a corrupt police department. I'm surprised that isn't the story of the century.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of brushed that once it became, you know, law, it just kind of got brushed under the case itself.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, listen, I love that you had me up here tonight. Huh?
Hey man, I appreciate you coming up anytime. You know, I like the way we, you know, I have certain creators that I can bounce back and forth with. It's fluid. It's, you know, it's very easy to talk to, and you know, I'm getting you guys up here and, you know, kind of picking your brain as well, because I don't know it all. I like to have analytical thinkers rather than speculative people up here. You know what I mean?
Speculating can be fun when you're dealing with facts. Like if you speculate, you know, like we've done that with where the nice sheep was found, blah blah blah. We've
Oh
speculated
yeah,
based on speculation is an interesting thing to do, and it's really the only way that you're going to come to some kind of comfortable understanding. So I don't object to that at all. But speculation where you're adding in unverifiable data,
yeah.
maybe I'm a computer and I just don't fucking know. I don't know.
Well, let me plug your channel right quick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you didn't have to.
Yaw News Network. Started usually on there about 9 p.m.
Eastern time,
and
Monday to Friday.
Eastern
Your
time.
News Network. Yep.
Yes, he's also on Twitter or X. So you guys go check him out. Him and Cletus do a wonderful job over there. They have some very interesting guests, and it's unlike this channel, it's a lot more energetic with different topics that bring humor, they bring seriousness, they bring light to certain situations that others don't talk about. You know, so go check it out. It's a wonderful channel to spend some
Thank you
time.
there, 12 Gauge. That was great of you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very good, clean fun.
Yeah, and we've been up here. This has been awesome. I've been up here over an hour, and I didn't expect that. I actually, I was just going to come in and say hi and then jump out. But
Well, anytime you're in the neighborhood, man, feel free to come
right, well,
up.
don't forget to stop in with us either.
All right, I won't, man.
Although we do over talking because we're hyper over there, bro.
I've been very busy on my studies and stuff like that, trying to get it done.
All right, good. All right, cool.
All right, man. You have a good weekend. Be safe, and the rest of you in chat, be safe and stay vigilant, and try to remember that even if you're not into the crime thing, I mean, we are just one moment away from a crime scene or actively being arrested ourselves. So never take your freedom for granted.
There you go. Thanks.
All right, you guys. I'm going to cue the music. See y'all later.